Good afternoon. The Public Safety Committee will now come to order. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Alderman Odenberg. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys.
Present.
Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Sanye.
Present.
Alderman Aldrich.
Present.
Chair Narayan.
Here.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. We have 6 present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Quorum being present, I will now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of Thursday, February 22nd, 2024.
So move.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Odenberg.
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Sanye.
Aye.
Alderman Aldrich.
Aye.
Chair Narayan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. We have 7 aye votes.
All right, with that, we have approved the minutes, and we will move to item number 1 on the agenda, which is Board Bill number 96. Alderwoman Boyd, you may proceed.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to come before you this afternoon for Board Bill 96. And I have 3 amendments that I would like to add to this bill, if I could, please, if you all would. They should be at your desk. So amendment number 1, it is beginning page 2, line 18 to 19. Strike out the words "within 1/4 mile of an occupied structure located within the city of St. Louis." And page 3, line 4, after the word "conservation," insert the following words: "Nothing in this subdivision shall prevent a municipality from adopting an ordinance restricting the discharge of a firearm within 1/4 mile of an occupied structure." Does everyone have that?
Yeah.
Any questions or comments?
No, is that the end of the amendments that we have in front of?
1.
Okay, that's Amendment 1. All right. I would make a motion that we adopt Amendment 1 to Board Bill number 96, committee substitute.
Second.
So moved.
Previous roll.
Previous row.
All right, hearing no objection, we have now adopted Amendment number 1, so we now have in front of us Board Bill number 96, committee sub as amended. Alderman, please proceed.
Amendment 2, and it's beginning on page 4, line 1. Strike out the word "shall" and insert in lieu thereof the word "may." And beginning on page 4, line 3, strike out the word and insert in lieu thereof of the figure. And you see the dots dash. And page 4, line 4, after the word "days," add the word "or both such fine and period of incarceration to be determined by the court." Beginning on page 4, line 6, strike out the word and insert in lieu thereof of the figure, the dash. Beginning page 4, line 7, after the word "days," add the words "or both should find such fine and period of incarceration to be determined by the court." Beginning page 4, line 9, strike out the word and insert in lieu thereof the figure ... comma. Beginning on page 4, line 10, after the words days, add the words or both shall find and period of incarceration to be determined by the court. Beginning page 4, line 13 to 14, strike out the words by a fine of up to $500 and a period of community service, and insert in lieu thereof the words in accordance with the provisions set forth under section 211.031(1) parentheses 3 RSMO and section 211.181.3 RSMO as and. Beginning page 4, line 18, after the word office, add the words in accordance with applicable law and as follows. Beginning page 5, line 4, before the word courts, add the words the municipal.
Anything further with Amendment 2?
No, that's it.
All right, at this point, I move that we adopt Amendment 2 to Board Bill number 96, Committee Substitute as amended.
So move. Second, previous row.
Hearing no objection, we have adopted Amendment number 2. You have one more amendment, correct? All right, please proceed.
Amendment number 3, to amend said board bill as follows on page 6, line 4 to line 8, strike out the words emergency clause, this being an ordinance for the preservation of public peace, health, and safety, and providing for public work or improvements and repairs thereof. It is hereby declared to be an emergency measure within the meaning of section 19 and 20 of Article 4 of the Charter, and therefore this ordinance shall become effective immediately upon its passage and approval of the mayor of the city, and insert in lieu thereof the words effective date. The effective date of this ordinance shall be 30 calendar days after either the mayor issues an executive order or the Board of Aldermen adopts a resolution stating that due to the enactment of state statute that has taken effect or due to other constitutional, regulatory, or case law changes, the city of St. Louis has the authority to prohibit and penalize the criminality, negligent discharge of a firearm within the city limits as set forth in this ordinance. And that's the last one.
All right, thank you, Alderwoman. At this point, I move that we adopt Amendment 3 to Board Bill number 6, Committee Substitute as amended.
Second.
All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, with that, we have adopted Amendment 3. Please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Public Safety, for allowing me to speak in regards to this critical bill that we have on our table before us, the Blair's Law. And this bill was created by Michelle LaShannon Lane, and it was in regards to her daughter being killed with celebratory celebration in July 4th, 2011. It is critical that we move forward to ensure that we keep our children and constituents safe within our city, and I ask for your favorable consideration.
Thank you, Alderwoman. At this point, absent any objection, I would move that we make this bill in bank.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right, so all of us have now been added as co-sponsors, and with that, I will open it up for discussion from the committee. Alderman Oldenburg.
No questions, just thanking the sponsor for her work on this, and look forward to getting it through the full Board of Aldermen in a very speedy fashion, and hope it can help.
Thank you.
But
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Thank you.
Alderwoman Keys.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee. I have no questions. Again, thank you so much to the sponsor, Alderwoman Boyd, for all your hard work on this.
All right, Alderwoman Velasquez,
No questions. Thank you.
Alderwoman Saunier,
No questions. Thank you, Alderwoman Boyd, for your work.
Alderman Aldridge.
No questions. Thank you, Alderwoman, for this.
All right, and I also thank you for this. I think this is an important piece of legislation. I hope that the folks in Jefferson City do what they need to do so that we can implement this here. There's no excuse for discharging firearms into the air in city limits. It's a pretty crazy thing to do. So thank you for your work on this. And with that, I move that we pass Board Bill number 96, committee substitute as amended, out of committee with a due pass recommendation.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? All right, well, you have passed this out of committee. Congratulations, Alderwoman.
And I want to thank the mayor's office for working with me. Bill, thank you.
All right, now we will move to Board Bill number 185. Alderman Aldridge, you may proceed.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for hearing Board Bill 185. Before I begin walking through, I would like to first adopt the committee substitute, which we'll be talking about.
Second.
All right, there's been a motion and a second to adopt the committee substitute. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, we have adopted Board Bill number 185, committee substitute. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. So Board Bill 185 is a board bill that brings oversight to surveillance technology that's used in the city of St. Louis. It's probably a similar piece of legislation that we've seen back in 2019. Legendary Terry Kennedy, who's our clerk, started this process with trying to work on this legislation going back as 2021, where Alderwoman and Annie Rice had filed it and actually had a very diverse group of co-sponsors on it. So I'm gonna kind of walk through the piece of the legislation because I think during this conversation, there's been a lot of beliefs of what's in the bill and what's not in the bill. Some have read it, some haven't. So I'm not asking for a vote today. I look forward to hearing from my colleagues and members of the public to get input on how we make this bill stronger. But I think it's important for us to know what's actually in the legislation that's in front of us. So one new add that we added in the whereas clause, which I want to it's a very last whereas clause where we talk about the mayor signed executive order number 78 on February 23rd of 2024. I think that executive order was a huge step for surveillance technology. I think this legislation is a way we can build on it and add oversight as we also have transparency. A few key things as we get to section 1 in the definitions. So a key definition that is new to the legislation that was actually brought under Alderwoman Velasquez as she was working on this was, which I think is really important, is identifying intelligence or artificial intelligence. As we know, technology continues to change and it's rampant. It's changing on a monthly basis. We wanted to ensure when we're talking about surveillance technology, back in the day when this bill was filed, AI wasn't a big thing, but it is now and it's constantly changing. I want to point to section 2. It's a simple definition. It talks about city entities, but in that section, I know one of the concerns that have constantly been brought up is about special tax districts. So this would exclude special tax districts from having to worry about going through oversight when it comes to their technology. The definition number 6 is new surveillance technology. When we get to section 2 and we talk about the board approval process, you'll see that in several places. Section 8 is just we lay out what type of surveillance technologies that we're talking about, from hardware to software devices to electronic surveillance devices. Further down, it talks about what those different devices could be, such as automatic license plates reader, mobile DNA technology, gunshot detector, which some of us know that as shot spotters, and various different other pieces of technology. Section 2. Section 2 is the Board of Aldermen approval process. So this would be for the Board of Aldermen would approve the surveillance use of the technology in a form of a resolution. And I think it's important to talk about the resolution compared to a board bill. A resolution understanding that these technologies may be important, it allows for that process to move forward quicker than what our board bill process we have. You know, through the board bill, it's on second reading, perfected in third reading. It would be a lot faster under this resolution. But Section 2 also allows for public engagement in the process when we're talking about different technologies that the department is trying to get. So Section 2, like I say, really lays out the process of how it would come through the committee. The community would have input on that process, and from the committee, it would move in a form of a resolution. And a resolution, again, is an up or down vote. It doesn't go through different type of votes. Throughout Section 2, one thing I want to talk about is the RFP process. I know that was an email that several committee members got from the Board of Aldermen that it would slow down the RFP process or grant process. Right now, the way that we actually do grant processes at the Board of Aldermen, I believe we passed one, not this committee, but in other committees, a lot of grants, if it's streets that we recently just approved a grant for driver's ed, or Alderman Cone carries a lot of grant RFPs through the airport. For our airport, it is the same process that we do through these different branches that we'll be doing with technology. So it is not a new process. It's the same process that we currently already have in place. In that section, as you get to line 14, section, letter C, it was important in an old piece of legislation, it was important that the RTCC was carved out, because we do not want to stop any operations or hold up the process when it comes to the way that the real-time crime center operates. Section 3 talks about the surveillance use plan. So again, this is just additional add-on to what already is in the mayor's executive order that she recently signed, that there would have to be that policy would have to be laid out. What we're adding is that as the Board of Aldermen, when those policies come under the committee, on Section 9, we talk about how the Board of Aldermen may request and review experts such as from the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency Division, or Civil Rights Agency, the Division of Oversight, Information Technology, or any other experts that could be helpful as we go through these different technology surveillance use plans. As you go through Section 3, there is different items that those surveillance use plans would need to include when they bring those in front of the board about the technology, such as just a general description, the purpose of it, the authorized use, how it's being deployed, the cost, data collection, data protection, data retention, data, how their surveillance data is being shared, and again, that are training and complaints. Again, that use plan would be a plan that they come up with when they're talking about these different technologies, so that the public can actually know how ShotSpotter is being used or how cameras are being used. And I think that's important as a Board of Aldermen for us to know how we're being efficient with some of the technologies that we have. Do we need to work with the department to get more, or if it's not efficient, how can we get better technology so that taxpayer dollars aren't being wasted? They would have to also, with that use plan, have it on the city website up to 21 days. Again, right now, under the executive order, some of those policies around those technology is up on the website currently. Section 4 talks about the review of existing technology. So currently, all the existing technology that the board or that the department already has, they would basically have a year to get approval for it. So they will have 150 days to be able to provide a use plan to the board or to the committee, for the committee to review that use plan, make sure we have all the information, ask any questions, and then that use plan would come in front of the committee, where committee members can have input, and then ultimately the board or the committee will vote on it and send it to the board of aldermen. Section 5 is just talking about who's the lead identity person. Section 6 is a standard of approval, mainly more for older people. It's not a requirement, but this is helpful when you talk about the cost analysis of these different use plans and technologies that we have to ensure at least the Board of Aldermen have some type of guideline or how we're working on it. Section 7 talks about, again, it's a build on to the executive order that the mayor recently signed. We go a little further with some of the requirements that we want to be able to see in this annual surveillance report that the departments would have to provide to the Board of Aldermen and to the clerk before February 28th of each year. It would have a summary of how the surveillance is being used, how often the data is being collected, a breakdown of how much technology deployment was deployed, a summary of complaints, a total annual cost of that actual technology. Again, this is something that I think, I know that it's already in executive order. It's just an add-on to that. Section 8 talks about the deletion of these different type of requirements. This is a process that really lays out how this ordinance can be enforced and make sure that it is enforced, because we don't want to just pass anything and it's not enforceable. Section 9 talks about conflict of contracts. So basically, and I know this was another concern from Room 200, that this would stop all contracts, and it does not. What it says is any new technology that the department gets, if it is in line with the contract, that's fine. If the board were to decide to say, hey, ShotSpotters is audio, and now in the contract says audio, it says cameras, and it says video, but the board decided to say, no, we don't want the video element of it. On that section, what B says is that the department could continue to use that technology, but when they get renewal for that technology, either they would have to provide a new use plan where the board would agree on it, or they wouldn't be able to go into a contract with that technology because we've already denied the use plan. Section 10 is also another important one. It talks about certain private and public contracts. There's been a notion out there that if we were to do that, people in the special tax districts wouldn't be able to tie their technology to the real-time center, as well as an individual, Ms. Green, who lives on the corner, couldn't be able to use her ring light camera to tie that into. If you are a public person or a special tax district, you can be able to use your technology to work to the department if you want to tie it in. What Section 10 is saying is that nobody shall get paid off of that contract, especially if data is being shared. So it still allows individuals in special tax districts to be able to work with the police department if they want to tie their camera, or a private business to do so. They just can't use that in a way where they're making money off of that contract between them and the department. Section 11 is a simple one. It says, say there's an emergency, that the department need to use a technology, they would have the ability to use that technology in an emergency situation, and they would have 30 days to either cease using that technology or provide a use plan to the board. And then Section 12 was a piece that also Alderwoman Velasquez was able to get in, which I think is very important. It is talking about budget transparency and how we are able to see not just the line item budget from the department, but what other dollars that they get. And then section 13 and 14 are simple section severability clause and emergency clause. Again, there's a couple of things I just want to highlight, Mr. Chair, before I go to my expert. This is not a piece of legislation that is trying to make it harder for our police department. I've had the opportunity to sit down with the chief and also his chief of staff, and had the opportunity to sit down with the mayor. And I know we have another meeting coming up to try to figure out collaboration and cooperation. It is about, as technology is advancing, how do we make sure there's oversight in these different pieces of technology? I think the city did good with coming out with the executive order talking about transparency, but there's also no element in that where the community has input on how that technology is being used. This piece of legislation is not to stop or prohibit any technology. It is not an abolishment on technology. It is a true way that we can have oversight on technology as it's advancing. I know I'm working with Alderman Cone, who has Board Bill 105 and 106. We think it's very important, as we have enforcement around red light cameras, that we also have an oversight component so that the community know how these cameras are being used, where they would be deployed, and also to have a weigh-in on that process. Again, this is to ensure that there is oversight on these different pieces of technologies that come across this Board of Aldermen for community to weigh in on it. I think what's also important to know, once the technology gets approved, it doesn't have to get approved again. I think some individuals thought that they would have to come back annually to get approval of this technology. Once the board already approves that technology, unless any features of that surveillance software or hardware change, then they would have to come back in front of the board. So if the Board of Aldermen agrees to the Shot Spotters contract, which is a 3-year contract, and 3 years after that, nothing changed with it, the department would not have to come back in front of the board to get that approval. They would have to provide an annual use plan or annual report, which is already in the executive order, which we're elaborating on, which they would have to come in front of the Board of Aldermen, the committee, and say, hey, these are the different technologies we're using, and this is how we're using them. Also, Mr. Chairman, I do have an expert witness that will elaborate on some different parts of the bill that I'm ready to turn it over to him.
And is that Mr. Marlowe on the screen here?
Is Mr. Marlowe.
All right. Mr. Marlowe, if you could raise your right hand and swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability.
I do.
All right. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon. My name is Chad Marlowe, and I am a senior policy counsel at the ACLU, where I focus on privacy, surveillance, and technology issues. I am also the founding director of the ACLU's Community Control Over Police Surveillance, or CCOPS program. CCOPS was launched in September 2016 with the goal of changing the way local governments acquire and use surveillance technologies, moving it from a secretive process unilaterally controlled.
Chad, you're on mute.
Oh,
So go back like 40 seconds.
oh, sorry. Okay. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. CCOPS was launched in September of 2016 with the goal of changing the way local governments acquire and use surveillance technologies, moving it from a secretive process unilaterally controlled by the police to a transparent process that centers community opinions, including those who are the most impacted by surveillance, and which rest final decision-making authority in a democratically elected and accountable city council. Now, why did we launch CCOPS? CCOPS is certainly an effort focused on issues involving privacy, surveillance, transparency, and policing practices. But above all that, CCOPS is a racial justice effort. I say that because wherever in the United States the ACLU or any other entity has been able to secure reliable data, we have found that surveillance technologies are disproportionately used against persons of color. To be sure, disproportionate use also extends to certain religious and ethnic groups, to LGBTQ+ persons, to persons of lower income, to political activists, and to other groups. But the greatest disproportionate impact is clearly on persons of color. When it came to surveillance technologies, the voices of persons of color were not being heard. In fact, communities of color didn't even have a place at the decision-making table, and CCOPS sought to change that. CCOPS is not a new program. It is a tested and highly acclaimed effort that is now the nation's gold standard for surveillance technology consideration, transparency, and oversight. Since 2016, CCOPS has been adopted in 23 American cities, from the tiny Yellow Springs, Ohio, with a population of under 4,000 people, to New York City, with over 8 million. CCOPS has been an overwhelming success. No adopted CCOPS law has ever been repealed or even amended. Today, CCOPS is being taught in colleges and law schools throughout the nation. It has been the subject of numerous academic studies and papers, and in 2021, it was even honored as one of the top 3 technology and public purpose programs in the world by the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. CCOPS has such an unquestioned record of success that in the last 2 cities where it was adopted, Detroit and Boston, the bills passed their city councils unanimously. The CCOPS sponsor in Detroit is now president of their city council, and Boston's sponsor is now their mayor. Most notably, in Detroit, the bill passed with the endorsement of the Detroit Police Department and Department of Public Works, which certainly would not have been the case if CCOPS was anything less than an unconditional success and a widely acknowledged model for best policing practices when it comes to surveillance technologies. One additional story about another city that adopted CCOPS is worth sharing because it shows that even the most well-meaning cities need CCOPS. Several years ago, Oakland, California, like numerous other American cities, declared itself a sanctuary city, meaning that the city would not be using any of its resources to target undocumented residents or assisting any other entities in doing so. At the time, the city's police department, which fully supported the city sanctuary policy, was using automatic license plate readers, or ALPRs. What the police and city didn't realize, because they hadn't discussed the issue when they acquired the ALPRs, is that their ALPR data was being shared with the local fusion center and with the private company who helped manage and store the data. Although they don't know which entity was ultimately to blame, U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, also had access to the Fusion Center's data and was a customer of the same private ALPR company that Oakland used. As a result, ICE was able to get its hands on Oakland's ALPR data and use it to go after undocumented persons in that city. Oakland was horrified when it learned how their surveillance data had been misused, and within a year, it adopted a CCOPS law to ensure such oversights would never harm their population again. Now, I'd like to take some time to clear up some misconceptions about Board Bill 185. Board Bill 185 doesn't create a system in which any surveillance texts are automatically disapproved. But it does end a system in which surveillance technologies are automatically approved. Board Bill 185 doesn't prevent the police from having their influential voice heard in debates about whether a surveillance technology should be used. But it does prevent the police from having the only voice that is heard. Board Bill 185 doesn't prevent the police from deciding how best to deploy an approved surveillance technology, but it does ensure that they are not deployed in a manner that violates people's civil rights and civil liberties. Board Bill 185 doesn't place unreasonable burdens on the police department, but it does place the reasonable burden on them of thinking deeply about surveillance texts and the policies that should govern them before they are acquired and used. Board Bill 185 doesn't require the police to share state secret level details about proposed surveillance texts, but it does require them to release enough information to the public so that people can form educated opinions about if and how they want a particular surveillance tech used in their city. And CCOPS laws like Board Bill 185 don't lead to increases in crime, but they do ensure that real discussions take place about whether investing in surveillance technologies is the best way to reduce crime. A few days ago, the mayor issued Executive Order 78, which appears to be an effort to undercut support for Board Bill 185. If you read Board Bill 185 and Executive Order 78, you can tell that the drafters of the executive order read Board Bill 185, borrowed some of its language word for word, and then watered down the rest of the bill to the point that the executive order is essentially a status quo supporting measure that tells the police they can still do whatever they want when it comes to surveillance technology, as long as they are a bit more transparent and don't violate any existing laws. When CCOPS was launched in 2016, 17 national partner organizations, including leading civil rights and civil liberties organizations like the ACLU, the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, and the NAACP, created a guiding principles document for the effort. Using that CCOPS guiding principles document, I created a new document for this committee, which I believe was distributed to all of you in advance of the hearing. The new document lists those original guiding principles and compares how Board Bill 185 and Executive Order 78 do in satisfying them. I will now go through each of them and ask that the provided comparison document be entered into the record. The first standard that the organizations sought in a police surveillance oversight bill were that surveillance technologies should not be funded, acquired, or used without express city council approval. The board bill meets that standard, the executive order does not. The next is that local communities should play a significant and meaningful role in determining if and how surveillance technologies are funded, acquired, or used. The board bill meets that standard, the executive order does not. The process for considering the use of surveillance technologies should be transparent and well-informed. The board bill meets that standard, the executive order does not. The use of surveillance technologies should not be approved generally. Approvals, if provided, should be for specific technologies and specific limited uses. The board bill meets that standard, the executive order does not. Surveillance technologies should not be funded, acquired, or used without addressing their potential impacts on civil rights and civil liberties. The board bill meets that standard, the executive order does not. Surveillance technologies should not be funded, acquired, or used without considering their financial impact. Both the board bill and the executive order meet that standard. To verify legal compliance, surveillance technology use and deployment data should be reported publicly on an annual basis. The board bill meets that standard, and while the executive board does require that, its annual reporting is very limited compared to the board bill. And finally, city council approval should be required for all surveillance technologies and uses. There should be no grandfathering for technologies currently in use. The board bill meets that standard. The executive order does not. One final note about the board bill versus the executive order comparison. The next mayor of St. Louis could come in and eliminate the current mayor's executive order with a stroke of their pen, but they could not do so with the law passed by the Board of Aldermen. That is significant. Now, I understand that some people are opposed to CCOPS. While I think that is a mistaken view for many reasons, I respect the right of everyone to have their own opinion. And I should. After all, giving people the right to have and share their opinions is the foundation of CCOPS. What I do not appreciate, however, is spreading misinformation about CCOPS and Board Bill 185 in order to justify not supporting it. CCOPS is an 8-year-old effort and has passed laws in 23 cities. It is field tested. We know how it works and we know that it works. In that light, let me start by addressing the false claim that CCOPS laws increase crime. Mayor Jones is claiming, quote, "The statistical reality is that in most cities that have passed this type of legislation, crime has increased." That is factually wrong and also engages in a classic fallacy of causation argument. First, as to causation, crime has increased in many cities in the nation since the onset of COVID, a majority of which do not have CCOPs. So how does the mayor explain that? Second, if you actually look at large cities for which FBI crime data is available, in cities with CCOPs, crime was as likely to go down as it was to go up. But in cities without CCOPs, it was twice as likely to go up as to go down. So if anything, not having CCOPs leads to increases in crime. Now, I cannot fully explain that outcome, but it may be because cities without CCOPs continue to invest in surveillance technologies that have universally been shown to have no deterrent effect on crime, rather than investing in interventions that actually do. The next false claim about CCOPs is that it is burdensome to implement. Of the 23 cities that have adopted CCOPs, in only one, Seattle, could you credibly claim the law is a bit burdensome. The reason that is because Seattle greatly expanded what information has to go into its required use policies and annual reports, and in so doing, it deviated considerably from the CCOPs model bill every other CCOP city in Board Bill 185 originates from. Other than that, no CCOP city has had a problem complying with their law. In fact, Boston recently completed its review of all of that city's existing surveillance technologies in a single day. It's not that hard. The next false claim being made is that Board Bill 185 conflicts with Missouri state law, specifically section 84.341. To be frank, a first-year law student would be able to tell that there are no conflicts between Board Bill 185 and that law. The mayor's office is claiming Board Bill 185 conflicts with that law because it, quote, appears designed to curtail or obstruct police investigation work, including by slowing it down, by subjecting it to an uncertain approval process by an inherently political entity. Board Bill 185 is a good government transparency bill that doesn't inherently obstruct or curtail anything. In fact, Board Bill 185 is designed to aid the police by ensuring they are only using policing technologies and practices that have a meaningful impact on crime and don't undermine civil rights and civil liberties. And with all due respect to the mayor, Board Bill 185 accomplishes that by using the Board of Aldermen, which is an inherently democratic entity. And as for having an uncertain approval process, that's right. It is uncertain because the process is legitimate, thoughtful, and can result in an approval or disapproval of a surveillance technology. If you want a certain approval process, you'd have to look at the mayor's executive order, which is worse than a rubber stamp because it has no approval process at all. The police essentially get whatever they want. The last false claim being made I'd like to address is that Board Bill 185, quote, would end public-private camera collaborations. Board Bill 185, if adopted, would not automatically end anything other than the secretive, unilateral, unchecked police approval process for surveillance technologies. Asking for information and requiring permission does not equal a disapproval. In fact, surveillance technologies have been approved in CCOP cities innumerable times. The mayor has also commented that CCOP's laws like Board Bill 185 prevent the police from getting surveillance grants without prior approval. That's true, but the criticism lacks context. The mayor fails to note that the police can seek permission to apply for grants for a specific technology well before they actually do so. So this is not a real impediment if they are just willing to think ahead. The reason for this restriction is that, as numerous civil rights groups observed, once a grant is received for a surveillance technology and the money is in the bank, it becomes a use it or lose it situation, which puts overwhelming pressure on a city council to approve the technology and keep the money, which in turn undermines the CCOPs process. The city of St. Louis and its Board of Aldermen have been working on a CCOPs bill for over 6 years. If the city had acted faster, it could have been a national leader in adopting CCOPs, but that time is past. However, St. Louis can still adopt Board Bill 185 and jump on the bandwagon with the 23 other CCOP cities who provide their residents with the best approach to surveillance technology approval and oversight available in the United States in the 21st century. For that reason, I urge the committee to vote do pass on Board Bill 185. I thank you so much for your time and would be willing to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Marlowe. Does anyone on the committee have any questions for Mr. Marlowe? All right, then I will turn it back over to the sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and open for any questions on the piece of legislation before we get to the speakers, or however you want to do it.
Does anyone have any questions before we hear from the chief, the administration, anyone like that? Okay, perfect. Then we'll just hear from the chief, I guess. All right, chief, please proceed. Did you steal the microphone, Rasheen? Just make sure the light's green on it. Perfect. Please proceed.
Do we need to swear him in?
No, he's a city employee, so.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Members of the committee, give me an opportunity to speak to this Board Bill 185. We've been working on it. We had an executive order, and then also I've sat down with a couple of members that were sponsoring this bill, first starting with Alderwoman Velasquez and now Alderman Aldridge. And I appreciate that opportunity to be able to speak my concerns. But even after having a chance to sit down and the way the bill's written right now, Board Bill 185, I could not support. My primary duty is to protect the residents of St. Louis, and for that reason, I cannot sit here the way it's written, because we do have an executive order that's in place that I think is well written.
Apologize, Chief. I'm sorry. Could you announce yourself to the public who you are?
Yes.
Thank you.
Chief Robert Tracy, St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. Thank you for having me. And some of the things that I take a look at, the executive order covers a lot of the things, I think the concerns that were brought to me from elected officials, and I think that covered everything. But when you take a look at technology, I'm hearing that there's no oversight on the technology that we're using. And first of all, when you're down police officers, where every police department in the United States, you have to leverage technology, but you have to leverage it in the right way. And there are already guardrails and oversights from federal, state, and local laws that are in place that we have to abide by. And we continue to do that. And then I think another thing is that maybe we need to do a better job of making sure people understand what we're using it for. And that's why when we were talking about this board bill before we did the executive order, I had agreed, why don't I do a presentation like I've done in other cities, make sure that what technology I'm talking about, I explain to it, have measurements on it, what we're using, making sure that we're not violating people's civil rights and civil liberties with this technology, and showing the use of helping to keep our city safer. And when I hear that CCOPS will give oversight, well, when we're presenting on each one of these things, we also go before a budget committee. I also offered, why don't we make a line item in the budget and then speak about every piece of technology we're using and explain the use, and public comment can happen there. And that gets approved in the budget. So we do have oversight, that we're creating redundancies right now with another layer. And then I believe what we have in executive order right now is covering the things that we have to make sure that we're doing it right. We're transparent as far as what we're going to be reporting out. You have the budgetary process to approve already what we're using. You have public comment on it. And then if we create these additional layers, I think it's going to hurt the city of St. Louis. And I've seen this happen in other cities that I've been in. Sometimes very good intentions have unintended consequences because there's interpretations that happen where we try to legislate policing. And sometimes when we over-legislate or create some of these roadblocks, crime goes up. And I'm going to have to disagree with the gentleman that just spoke before, because I do speak to chiefs of police throughout the United States, and the ones that do have CCOP have said it has been overly burdensome, and crime has gone up because of some things that are happening when it became for approval process, not funding, or waiting for the approval process that they've lost grants. So there's many areas that, you know, it might sound great on the surface, but I've seen where it has hurt us. I think we got good things in place. You know, last Friday, we posted our policies. It was never been posted. So to educate the public, it's not about legislating for these things. It's about having good policies in place, what people understand with the policies, having a police chief and the administration be able to explain it. And these technologies that we're using, I'm very fearful if they are compromised, that crime can go up, and it has come up in other places. And using ShotSpotter, using license plate readers, using camera, using mugshot technology, using our body-worn cameras, and also using mobile camera trailers, I think have been very effective, and we've done it in a very respectful way where we're protecting people's civil liberties. And this concerns me. I mean, I can go into specifics. I can get into other things. I know this is just a presentation right now, but to go on record, I just wanted to make sure that from my experience in over 40 years in this profession and looking at reducing crime in cities, how we leverage technology, I'm very fearful that this additional oversight, when we have something in place with that executive order, and an executive order can be rescinded, but so can ordinances. And if an executive order does get rescinded, then let's go back and visit Board Bill 185. But at this time, I think things are working well, and I think it satisfies everything in what the mayor put out last Friday, we did a press conference on. So I would open it up to any questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chief. Does anyone have any questions for the chief, or do we want to wait until after other people have spoken? I'm fine either way if someone has a question. Sure, please proceed.
Hey, Chief, thanks for being here today. You mentioned you've been in policing for 40 years, over 40 years, in major cities such as high-ranked positions in New York and Chicago, most recently in Wilmington, and I think I speak for a lot of community members that we're grateful that expertise is here. I have a very simple question. In your professional police expertise, do you believe this board bill will create challenges for the men and women in the St. Louis Police Department to effectively keep residents safe?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
All right, sounds like, oh, please proceed.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. I know you mentioned for fear of crime going up. Can you elaborate about like what situations this bill creates that you think could lead to crime increasing? I just think that's a very serious accusation. You know, that safety is at the top of most people's minds, and I think it's the top thing that we want to protect. So I just think if you say that, I would just like to hear some supporting evidence for that, or what you might think this could lead to.
Well, absolutely. If we take gunshot detection technology, which we use ShotSpotter in this city, I hear a lot of people say it overly polices communities of color if we come to a spot where a person's shot. Well, I'm sorry, we're the first responders, and if someone's shot on that scene, we're trained in first aid, so we can save lives. We also get to a location where we can pick up shell casings, or get to a scene where the person was a shooter, capture that person so they don't go shoot again, or we can pick up evidence that's going to help us with a homicide investigation and or attach it to other shell casings. If that's compromised, and some of these things that are in place, because I've heard that doesn't work. I already know there's people out there that probably don't understand it, and I can go into greater detail when I do explain it. But ShotSpotter has helped in every city that I've been in, when used correctly, when leveraged in the right way. It actually has reduced shootings, which overall reduced homicides in the city. So that I could talk from personal experience from being a crime strategist and using it in other cities to get to places where I was in my last city, what's called Murdertown, USA, which was Wilmington, Delaware. They were not using ShotSpotter in the proper way that it should be used. Not that they were violating people's rights. They weren't leveraging the technology, picking up the shell casings. And I believe that's a big part of why we had a 60% reduction in homicides in the city of Wilmington after I left on January 6th and started here on January 9th of last year. And they've continued to use it, and they've actually driven those numbers further down, leveraging the technology in the right way. So that's just one example, but I worry there is an active, and I've heard elected officials actually say it doesn't work, and it harms people in black and brown communities. So I worry when this bill, when you have something where there's oversight and we have elected officials that are already saying they don't want it, that worries me because it does work. And if I get a chance to explain it and show what it does, I'm about saving lives. But I'm going to do it fairly, constitutionally, respectfully, and I'm going to use this technology in the right way. And there are safeguards if I don't use it the right way, then it will be taken away because a lot of these grants already, I have to abide by the rules and federal rules that are in place. So that's one example. I could use many, many, but I know there's going to be a lot more speakers up there. But that's a prime example. And so, yes, I worry about that because my job to come to this city is to do what I did in the last city with the great men and women of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, the community, the elected officials, faith-based community. That's why I go to so many community meetings and I talk about ShotSpotter in a way to help this out.
I understand your concern, but I think ShotSpotter is a good example because ShotSpotter did have to go through a vote for ENA, and ultimately when that vote process happened, it did still get approved and the contract, was renewed. And also, like, all of that is contingent upon if. So I think, like, the question of this bill to me is like, really we're asking, do you think that communities deserve a direct say in the technology that goes into their community? Like, do you think do you understand some of the residents and constituents and elected officials who are saying, like, this is our opportunity to have input on the process and to be aware? Because, I think it's something that is 2024 and transparency we're clapping for. That's really such a low bar. Like, we should have had transparency, and that's not on you. You're new here, and that's a step forward, but I'm saying that is kind of the root of a lot of concerns. This bill is not saying let's take things away. This bill is saying let's put a public process in place and let's ask communities what they want. And it kind of seems like to me that you're saying, well, I'm nervous that if we leave it up to communities that they will decide that they don't want certain things, but isn't that their right? If we do decide that we don't want that, or communities decide that they don't want that, isn't that their right? Shouldn't they have a say in that process?
They do have a process. They do have a say with the elected officials in place that serve on this board. You actually have the right to approve a budget where I give a presentation at the end of the year or at any time that you need me. I'll come up if you want to make a special session. I know the public safety chair, if you ask me to talk about any technologies, whether they're waiting for a year and public comment about that, but you also have the ability with the oversight with the public safety committee for the chief of police to report out on those things already. We're very transparent. Just put the policies up online. The executive order covers that. And then if there's anything that's needed within the budget process, if we do line items, we're already having people have public comment and a say whether or not to support it. And that happened last year with ShotSpotter. And actually the public had a right to speak to it. So you're not creating a process that wasn't there before. It's here now. We're just adding another layer to it. But the people do have a due process to say how they feel that I've watched last year, and especially when it came to ShotSpotter.
I think I'm just going to respectfully disagree because ShotSpotter, again, was something that communities came to the budget process, but the Board of Aldermen we don't get to add and take away things in our budget. That process is largely led by ENA, which consists of the mayor and the president and the comptroller, but that's not something that we don't have full budgetary power over. And I saw in that circumstance, I did hear all of the public comments that we got on the budget committee, because I serve on that committee. ShotSpotter was a top thing, but I also saw ENA go right back and still approve the contract, and there was no public process. Said they didn't even know that the vote was coming. They didn't know that was happening. And so to me, this bill, I just think that communities have to have a fundamental right, especially when you talked about Black and brown communities. Black and brown communities have a mistrust for police, and I don't really think that you guys opposing this bill helps build that trust, because a way to build it would be, hey, we think our technology is good. We think what we're going to put in place, you're going to like. We're happy to come talk to you about it, and we're happy to come vote for it. And I think, too, we don't want to politicize the process. But you guys are a police department. You do police the entire city of St. Louis. It's a public political process. Whether or not it's a transparent, accountable process is the question. But it is a public and political process either way that it goes.
Well, when it comes to public trust, I'm out in every community, and whatever community I am in, the overall majority continues, can we have more of this? Can we have more cameras? Can we have more shot spotter? So we do have a lot of trust in the community. I know that gets thrown out there a lot. Police department doesn't have the trust, and going against this bill is not going to build trust. I think it's going to building trust right now that you got a police chief that's trying to save lives, that's going out to community members and asking them. And a lot of them come to me and say, Chief, please do not support that bill. Chief, please make sure that our voice is heard when you speak. So the overwhelming people are telling me as well, although I'm not an elected official, I certainly have a standing and a responsibility to listen to our constituents as well and what their needs are, whether they get up here and talk publicly or not. But I'm going to many, many meetings, and the overwhelming, whatever community, whether it's black, brown, white communities, they're all telling me the same thing, that they want more. Maybe there's a faction that's telling you different, but when we keep saying that if I go against this, I'm not helping with public trust, I'm going to disagree. We're building a lot of trust, and just because we disagree doesn't, the community is not going to trust the police anymore.
Agreed, and I do see you at community meetings. You were just at one of mine this past month, but again, there's a difference between, as a police department, saying, I want to build trust with you by telling you what I'm going to do versus saying, I want to build trust with you by allowing you input on what I'm going to do. Those are not the same things, and that's not the same trust building mechanism. And I actually think that even if we put this bill in place, people will vote for what you ask for. I serve on this board, so I know my colleagues. This board has done so many things to support the police department. This is the board that approved historic raises for the police department that have happened in decades. This is the board that approved millions of dollars of ARPA funds to go to police vehicles. I haven't seen anything from this board or from my colleagues or even in conversation with them to say that, nor have I heard things in community of people saying, we don't want the police, but I do hear people in community saying that it's not good enough to tell us what they are doing. We want to have a say-so in what we are doing.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Just one question, Chief, if you can weigh in on this, and if this is not your expertise, I don't know is a completely appropriate answer. We've heard from the administration that there are some concerns surrounding the state law enforcement Bill of Rights here. Can you weigh in on that at all?
I can weigh in that there are some things that they're in the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights of the state of Missouri. It's my fourth state. Each one has Law Enforcement Bill of Rights. So I believe it's things that could prevent the police, or things that impede the police from allowing to do their job, or using certain types of technology or systems. Then that in the law and in the interpretation, it can be there. It depends on a certain situation. And if you can give me a specific, I could probably answer it. I'm not trying to work around it. I just don't want to give a broad answer. And there's going to be, if there's certain specifics, it depends on what's happening at the time and the interpretation of LEOBR with that, sir.
Okay, totally understood. And would it be possible, Celeste, to get a some sort of opinion on that as we move forward here? All right, thank you, Casey.
Thank you, Mr. Chief. And to clarify, I don't think it's Police Bill of Rights. I could get you the section that talks about that, but it's not under Police Bill of Rights.
I believe it's 84 -341 of Missouri.
Yep. And in the memo that we sent out to the committee, we talked about that one and how could talk to you. It's in the memo.
Sure. No, and I think we're just, I at least have gotten conflicting information on it, and so it's one of those things where I just want to make sure, knowing that part of my concern personally that I can speak to is any violation of that leads to removal of office and a $2,500 fine, and I'd rather not give the state of Missouri $2,500. So
again, you could look at that, Alderman. I think if you, we could look at it.
Yeah. I just want an opinion that from city council or someone who's dug in to take a look at that is all.
Gotcha. Question to the chief. Thank you for being here. And I also want to be Thank you for the few conversations that we've had to try to figure out what is the issue. And if we could kind of dig in on the piece of the legislation, what in the legislation would be a sticking point that makes it hard for your department? Because when you say transparency, that's probably about 85% of the legislation. What is it, so we can know, because we're not taking a hearing, is how do we do something, I think, with oversight and transparency to get something. So is there any key things in the legislation that need to be addressed?
I think we can continue to talk about that, Alderman. I'd rather have those conversations. You're asking me right now what goes beyond what the executive order is doing. I believe the executive order, how it's written, is actually good legislation, or an executive order that covers most of the concerns that I've talked to legislative officials about. And now this is going, with the CCOPS, is going a little further, where I understand, and we've talked about Seattle going further on it, an interpretation, coming from this gentleman that testified earlier. There's other things in place that I think there's enough in there, and everything that's going further. But if you want to have continued conversation, because right now we're just having a discussion, concerns, but I'd be happy to continue the conversations with you.
Gotcha. And then just one last question. Was there a similar process like this in Wilmington where the committee or the board made input on grants or technology?
Yes, they did. And at some points, they did hold us up that we did lose, because there was political infighting and leveraging one bill over the other one, where since they couldn't get one, we actually almost forfeited a substantial amount of money, and we're giving it back to the federal government. That would have worked well for public safety.
And did that have an effect on your crime rate?
Maybe it could have, it's speculative. Maybe it could have gone down more. I don't know. But you know what? It certainly jeopardized tools that we were using to make sure that we can try to make the city safer in my strategy and how I can deploy people.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Anything further from any of the members? All right, well, thank you, Chief.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. Thank you, members of the committee.
And at this point, I guess we will move to public comment. Madam Clerk, if you could call the first individual forward.
I have Mr. John Chasnoff in support.
Mr. Chasnoff, do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability? All right, do you have the microphone there? You started a trend. All right, Mr. Chasnoff, just make sure that light is green, and you have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate being here today. I wanted to focus on the question that you just raised about the state statute and whether there's a concern about going and running up against the state statute in some way. I have some historical experience with that particular statute and wanted to share my knowledge about it. So first of all, the statute in question is 84.341. And when you read the title of that provision, you might think that there is a problem. The provision says it's a prohibition on state officials and political subdivisions interfering with the St. Louis Municipal Police Force. And the first sentence is very convoluted. I won't read it, but I think I can summarize it accurately by saying the first sentence says that no elected official can act in a way that interferes with the police department doing investigations. Now, on the face of it, it seems like the administration has a legitimate argument when you read that first sentence. But I do want to quote the second sentence. It says, let me find it, I'm sorry. This section shall not be construed to prevent such officials, elected officials, from acting within the normal course and scope of their employment or from acting to implement various sections of the state statutes. Clearly, this is saying that if you're acting outside of your official duties, you can't interfere with the police department. If you're acting within your official duties, which passing a board bill is definitely within your official duties, this provision does not have anything to say about those situations. I can't find anything in the ordinance that I think interferes with an investigation, but even if it did, this provision wouldn't apply. Historically, this provision was passed as part of the Bill for Local Control, the ballot initiative in 2012 for local control. And I was very involved in that, as was the mayor, so I'm very surprised that she's putting forth this argument. Historically, there was a concern that if they gave local control to St. Louis, the aldermen might use their influence inappropriately. So if you had to say so over the police department and your friend got arrested or got a ticket, you might pick up the phone, call somebody at the police department, try to get that ticket, nullified, get the person out from under arrest. That was the purpose of that provision. And that's why they made a very specific distinction between acting within your official duties and acting inappropriately outside of your official duties, picking up the phone and calling. So I don't think that the provision could be any more clear. I'm dismayed at the administration for making that argument, and I don't think you have anything to be concerned about.
Okay, that is your time. Thank you, and thank you for that. And we will move to the second speaker.
We have Emma Kenny Pessia from the 9th Ward.
All right. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I do.
All right. You have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Good afternoon. My name is Emma Kenny Pessia, and I'm a resident of the 9th Ward, a law student at WashU, and a student fellow at the Cordell Institute for Policy and Medicine Law. And I'm here to testify in support of Board Bill 185. Public safety and traffic safety are troublesome problems, but more surveillance is not the solution, especially when that technology is purchased and deployed in secret. There's mixed evidence on whether these technologies are actually effective. For example, in the case of red light cameras, it's not clear that they actually help catch red light runners, particularly those in stolen vehicles, cars with missing plates, or plates with license plate covers designed to thwart cameras. In fact, there's good reason to believe that they might actually make roads less safe by causing law-abiding drivers to slam on their brakes or others to speed up through lights to avoid a ticket. What is clear about these technologies is that they make a lot of money for the companies that aggressively market them to police departments, and St. Louis taxpayers foot the bill. There's another cost, and it's a steep one. Surveillance imperils civil liberties by enabling the tracking of entire neighborhoods with no warrant, subpoena, or judicial oversight. It also puts countless of St. Louisans at risk of wrongful citation or arrest. The steep costs and dubious benefits of surveillance technology demonstrate the need for public oversight. It's crucial that police surveillance technologies be adopted publicly, not purchased and deployed in secret. The deployment of technologies like ALPRs, red light and surveillance cameras, drone surveillance, mobile DNA capture technology, and gunshot detectors needs to happen in public after notice and opportunity for comment. The people of St. Louis deserve to know how much money is being spent on this technology, how it's being approved and deployed, and that our data won't be sold or used in nefarious ways. We have a right to have a say in what is being done in our name and with our money before expensive and Orwellian technologies of surveillance are used on us. To put it simply, we need this bill because we need to be able to see the technologies that watch us all. For that reason, I urge you to support Board Bill 185. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Gabby Eisner of the Second Ward.
All right, Ms. Eisner, do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I do.
All right, you have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Good afternoon. My name is Gabby Eisner, and I live in the Second Ward. And I'm here today representing the Interfaith Committee on Latin America, or IFCLA. IFCLA is an organization that has worked alongside immigrants and their families here in St. Louis for over 40 years. And I'm here to express our support for Board Bill 185. IFCLA works alongside a group of over 100 asylum seekers in the area who are currently under some form of state surveillance. They are surveilled through an array of electronic monitoring tools, including ankle shackles, voice recognition technology, and a mobile app called SmartLink that uses facial recognition software and geolocation for check-ins. These surveillance technologies are a way for the police and ICE to extend their reach to asylum seekers' homes, their family lives, and their communities. Law enforcement has acquired quite an arsenal of privacy-invasive surveillance technologies. And far too often, as we've heard, that this acquisition takes place under a cloak of secrecy. Instead of continuing this status quo of allowing the police and other government agencies to make decisions about acquiring surveillance unilaterally and in secret, Board Bill 185 requires that such decisions be made transparently by the democratically accountable members of the board, and that such decisions are made after providing the public with significant information about the technology and an opportunity to voice their opinions. This process allows impacted community members, including migrant community members who have been disproportionately targeted by surveillance, to comment on any new technologies proposed. We need the oversight mechanisms that Board Bill 185 provides in place. And so I ask the Public Safety Committee to vote yes on this bill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And next up, Madam Clerk.
Next, we have Mr. Benjamin Nickeldime from the First Ward.
All right. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I do.
All right, 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Good afternoon. I'm Ben Nicodeme. Like they said, I'm from the First Ward, and I'm here to testify in support of Board Bill 185. And actually, just yesterday, I was listening to St. Louis Public Radio, and there was a thing on The World about a spyware that governments and law enforcement have used that planting on cell phones, and it kind of freaked me out, not gonna lie. I Googled, how do you check if you have Pegasus on your phone? And the short answer is you can't. But it really freaked me out, and it got me thinking, I don't want the government using my tax money to hack my phone without me even knowing it. I at least want there to be some oversight in how surveillance technology is used. And I think that there's one thing that the left and the right politically consistently agree on, and that is generally that we want to offer people the right to privacy and a right to their own privacy. So I think that the least we can do, the absolute least, is having some amount of oversight, some amount of accountability on what surveillance technology is used. So, in short, I want to know what surveillance technology they're using. I don't want my phone hacked, and I believe that we need more oversight. And that is why I support Bill 185. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Jake Lionfields from the 7th Ward.
All right, Mr. Lionfields, do you swear or affirm to tell that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I do, thank you.
All right, 3 minutes. Please proceed.
It's good to see you all again. I think this is week number 3 in a row. But I was here the last couple weeks because I was representing my neighborhood, Gravelly Park, and the efforts by Alderwoman Saunier to pass Board Bill 199, which regulates the use of for-profit commercial drones in the city of St. Louis. I was really pleased that the Public Safety Committee passed that en banc, and it's headed to the full Board of Aldermen, I think tomorrow or one of the next meetings. But the reason that my community stood up against this bogus for-profit drone surveillance scheme in Gravelly Park is because we don't believe that we need more surveillance to keep us safe. Instead, after hearing news about this and doing lots of door knocking, canvassing, flyering, and having multiple community meetings, our community emphasized that the things that help us feel safe are improved neighborhood relationships and investments in our people. When we had one of the public meetings after this drone scheme was announced, there wasn't a single person, to really zero in on what our public safety priorities should be as a neighborhood, there wasn't a single person who said we needed more surveillance. We had dozens of people at that meeting, and instead we decided to focus on improving neighborhood relationships and seeing what we can do about increasing the affordability of housing, addressing vacancy, and helping our unhoused neighbors. We continue to work on those priorities. But I mention this because I want to emphasize that more technology does not mean more safety. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I want to emphasize that the police chief, and I really wish, for those of you who are watching online, the police chief did not stick around to hear the dozens of comments by folks who are concerned about the need to pass Board Bill 185. I wish he had stuck around because you would have heard a lot of our concerns. And that is an action that I think would establish trust, or at least begin to establish trust. He left. Okay. Well, I hope he watches this later, because the reality is that we do have a lot of concerns. And my concern in particular is that trust only exists when there's accountability. And we don't need to look back more than a few months to understand that there is no trust of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. They covered up the crash at Westminster Presbyterian, which was a crime perpetrated by the St. Louis Police Department. Their actions at Bar PM and their continued investigation of Mr. Morris and refusal to drop that investigation so he can go free does not establish trust. The kettling incident during the Stockley protest did not establish trust. There are a whole host of actions that the police department did that do not create an environment that facilitates trust. We need accountability for trust. And Board Bill 185 not only holds the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department accountable, it also frankly holds E&A accountable, which very recently renewed the ShotSpotter contract with very little public input. So this holds the existing system accountable, it holds it more accountable, and it demands...
That's your time. If you could just finish your thought.
It demands that any additional technology that's implemented in the city of St. Louis is more closely scrutinized. That's what we need. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
I have Mr. Chris Wilcock of the 14th Ward in support.
All right. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I do.
All right. 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you. My name is Chris Wilcox. I live in downtown West in the 14th Ward. I ask that the Public Safety Committee pass Board Bill 185. It's a critical step in providing a baseline understanding of control of the degree and nature of police surveillance in St. Louis. The mayor's proposed executive order is a worthless measure because it wouldn't survive their current government, and the continued lack of accountability for lives lost in the dungeon we have down in the City Injustice Center shows that you can't just take the mayor's word is not sufficient. We don't fully appreciate the degree to which St. Louis residents, particularly its Black residents and families, are already under the microscope. The Real-Time Crime Center has been in place since 2014. In 2024, we still have yet to have any reasonable oversight over a bare minimum of privacy regulations. Every time we see any of those gas-guzzling tower monstrosities scattered throughout the city, we have no way of knowing if a cop isn't just using it to stalk his ex-wife, let alone whether they are systematically abusing residents' civil liberties. This Bill 185 would finally give communities some information and input in how and whether these are used. And because the police chief had earlier mentioned that there are privacy regulations in place, I want to quote a particular report that was done by Rebecca Rivas in the St. Louis American and Type Investigations. Quote, a 6-month investigation by the St. Louis American and Type Investigations revealed that the center is operating under a privacy policy that the city acknowledged was essentially a rough draft. A more comprehensive policy was never implemented, according to emails between the St. Louis City Councilor's Office, community leaders, and the police street departments. The American obtained revised privacy policy, product of months of negotiations between community leaders in the city, but the police did not acknowledge the existence of this revised policy when asked, instead pointing to a one-paragraph, unrelated addition in existing policy. After months of repeated requests through the Missouri Sunshine Law for information, who has access to the surveillance information, and multiple requests for interviews, the police department did not provide any portion of the internal documentation required by its own policy on sharing the center's own information, including logs of all records requests made from people within and outside the police department. Therefore, it was impossible to determine, as the police department repeatedly claimed, if the Real-Time Crime Center was meeting its own protocols for safeguarding policy. Given that they've already demonstrated an unwillingness to even show evidence of their own policy being in place, I don't think we should do so now, and that's why Board Bill 185 should be passed. It would give St. Louis residents accounting for these dragnets and reverse the creeping police state that uses wastes public resources.
That is your time. If you could just finish your thought.
Sure. That's why we need to pass this bill to have a chance to actually have control over our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Next, we have Nathaniel King of the 6th Ward in support.
All right, Mr. King, do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I do, thank you.
All right, 3 minutes, please proceed.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Nathaniel King. I'm the Senior Data Scientist at the Center for Research and Innovation, and I live in the 6th Ward. Sorry, Daniel left. I'm speaking here today to encourage you to pass the Board Bill 185. Community oversight of surveillance technology is crucially important, and I wanted to address some of the concerns I've heard about this bill. First, I've heard that SLMPD can be relied upon to manage their own oversight. This I say, in 2019, this body passed a law requiring SLMPD to provide an annual report on methods. Since then, SLMPD has provided this information once. Because there were no consequences for SLMPD not sharing this information, they didn't have to do it, and they never did it again. Almost 5 years that y'all and the community at large have not had this information. We've been in the dark. Without robust civilian oversight and consequences associated with that, there is no way to hold SLMPD accountable for their surveillance technology. Second, I've heard some alders don't think they're qualified to provide oversight for surveillance. To this I say, there are 23 municipalities where this bill already exists, including Detroit, Boston, and Pittsburgh, and I know that all y'all are as qualified as the leaders there in those 3 cities. Further, this bill provides for expert advisement to help you make these complicated decisions. You're not going to be doing this alone. You're not acting in the dark. Third, I've heard there's no need for a CCOPS bill because Mayor Jones just signed Executive Order 78. To this I say, EO 78 is a weak order without consequences. And as we know, without consequences, SLMPD will feel no need to inform the public about their usage of surveillance technology. Further, executive orders only exist during the tenure of that executive. And considering the way that Mayor Jones has undercut her supporters' priorities at every opportunity, it seems unlikely to me that she will be mayor come May 2025, which means we'll be back in this situation without a proper CCOPS bill. Finally, I'd like to personally appeal to my Alderwoman Velasquez. Please support us by honoring your campaign pledge from 2023 to your constituents and the ACLU of Missouri by co-sponsoring this bill and voting yes to move out of committee. Thank you. And thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Next,
Thank you.
Ms. Maggie Olivia.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I do, thank you.
All right, 3 minutes, please proceed.
Thank you. My name is Maggie Olivia. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm here today on behalf of Abortion Action Missouri, formerly Pro-Choice Missouri. We are the largest grassroots pro-abortion advocacy organization within the state. We also run a 300-person volunteer clinic escort program and serve patients at the 2 closest abortion clinics to the St. Louis region, just across the river in Illinois. We are intimately familiar with the consequences. There's a lag here. I'm intimately familiar with the consequences of personal, private patient information getting into the hands of bad actors. This information is dangerous enough in the hands of protesters who already take photos, videos, and information and the like of patients outside of these clinics. But if this information was accessible to the state, that proposes an immediate danger to us all. Our reproductive health care decisions are already being surveilled by the state of Missouri. Even back in 2019, then DHS Director Randall Williams was caught attempting to track the menstrual cycles of patients at Planned Parenthood clinics in order to target people seeking abortion services. State officials seeking to use this personal health information against folks and their providers is not a hypothetical, it is already a reality state. Surveillance of the city of St. Louis not only endangers St. Louisans seeking abortion care, but now including the thousands, hundreds of thousands of people forced from states all across the South and Midwest who must travel through the city of St. Louis in order to access abortion care. As stated by those before me and in calls leading to today as well, I'd like to reiterate a quote from Inez Bordeaux, that public safety is rooted in community, and your community is here right now today imploring you to pass this measure. Folks who make up this room today, as well as individuals and organizations like Abortion Action Missouri, who commit their time and money and expertise to elect members of this body because we want to advance the health and safety of the people of this city, are imploring to pass this bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Tammy Buford of the 3rd Ward.
Ms. Buford, do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I do.
All right, 3 minutes, please proceed.
Hi, my name is Tammy Bufford. I'm a resident of the 3rd Ward and an organizer with Action St. Louis, working on the DRT campaign. I'm here today to urge you to support Board Bill 185. 23 cities across the country, which include Detroit, Nashville, Oakland, have some form of public oversight or surveillance technology, and for good reason. We, the people, deserve the right to approve or deny the use of any surveillance technology that will be used in our neighborhoods. We need your help to create transparency and oversight needed to protect the civil liberties and protect real public safety, to promote real public safety in our community. The executive order that the mayor announced on February 23rd does not include oversight, enforcement, or allow for community input. Additionally, the executive order is only good for the term of that administration. We need strong and lasting legislation as a long-term solution to ensure that the civil liberties of St. Louisans are protected for years to come, regardless of who's in room 200. SLMPD and city departments use surveillance technology in our neighborhood, but there's little public information about what they have or how they're using it or who has access within the legal framework. Board Bill 185 requires police and city departments to tell the public about the permissions and about the technology that they use, and to give permission about surveillance technology through a public hearing with the Board of Aldermen. Board Bill 185 gives the community to say in what technology is used, if it is going to be used, how it's going to be used, because the Board of Aldermen cannot approve any technology until the public has a chance to hear about it and share their concerns or support. Surveillance technology can be racist because it is poorly designed or implemented without proper guardrails. There is a Wired article that cited the use and deployment of ShotSpotter, particularly in Black neighborhoods, and the only way we found out about that was from a leaked document. Board Bill 185 will require the police departments to avoid racial discrimination in their use of surveillance technology by telling us exactly how they plan to use and combat these disparities and pitfalls. SLMPD doesn't tell the public what technology they're using, what crimes they're investigating.
That is your time. If you could please just finish your thought.
Okay. Using the technology and how effective it actually is in solving the crime. Board Bill 185 will require them to answer specific questions on technology in an annual report and how they're using that technology and how much money they're spending. Transparency and oversight mechanism provided was critical to building trust within the residents of the city of St. Louis. And then also, the mayor has...
We're past time now.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
All right, thanks.
We have next Sage Karam or Karam.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I do.
All right, 3 minutes, please proceed.
Hello, my name is Sage Coram, and I am the Legislative Associate with the ACLU of Missouri. I'm here to urge this committee and the Board of Aldermen to support Board Bill 185 and make community control over police surveillance, or CCOPS, a reality in St. Louis. Over the course of many years, elected officials, organizations, and most importantly, community members have worked to create the board bill that is in front of you today. The purpose of Board Bill 185 is to increase transparency and public engagement in decisions about if and how surveillance technology should be used by the city of St. Louis. Contrary to concern, this legislation does not support or oppose any specific form of surveillance, but rather it builds a transparent process for reviewing possible surveillance technology uses and provides the public a real opportunity to oppose unwanted technologies and its use. Ultimately, the final say in this approval process would reside with the Board of Aldermen. This is critical. Democratic accountability is essential for ensuring true community oversight, because elected bodies can face consequences if they vote against the will of the people. By establishing a public process for reviewing and approving specific surveillance technologies and their uses, Board Bill 185 provides that real opportunity for the communities of St. Louis who are here today, and especially those most impacted by surveillance, to speak and have their voices heard. Recently, concerns have been voiced about CCOPS legislation and the Board of Aldermen's ability to implement these transparencies and accountability measures. I want to underscore that St. Louis is not alone. In fact, we have the benefit of learning from CCOP's implementations across the country. If passed, we would be adopting a tested gold standard for surveillance approval and oversight that 23 other cities have already adopted. Claims that CCOPS has a detrimental impact in cities where it has been adopted or leads to increases in crime are completely false. We know fostering meaningful
That's your time. If you could please just wrap up your thought.
I will finish my thought. We know that fostering meaningful community input on surveillance technologies extends beyond budgetary transparency and reporting. And for many reasons, the ACLU stands with community members and organizations urging you to yes on Board Bill 185 and advance CCOPS.
Thank you.
Next, we have Fatima Kamara of the 10th Ward in support.
All right. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I do.
All right. 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Hello, my name is Fatima Kamara. I live in the 10th Ward. I'm here to speak in support of Board Bill 185. I'd like to start by stating for the record that our police chief basically was speaking about how much an inconvenience community oversight is, which to me is the biggest reason to have community oversight, because that just, not sure why he wouldn't want input from a community he's only, joined in the last few years. But the main thing I wanted to add to the record is that Board Bill 185 seems to allude to the risk of biases, and it talks about the human inputs required for artificial intelligence, but I didn't see where it specifically referred to bias in artificial intelligence, which is a well-known risk of artificial intelligence. For instance, a quote by Damien Hodel, a second-year PhD student at the University of Washington's Information School, says technology is never neutral because technology is developed by humans, and humans, as we know, aren't neutral. So individual biases by developers or by the data that's being used can leak into artificial intelligence. So clearly, the police chief is biased towards convenience, as it's easier to rely on technology, no matter how flawed, and to respond after the fact to that technology, which the police chief said he would like to do. It's easier to do that than it is to build ties with the community and to provide community resources that would prevent crime in the first place. So that's definitely my support for Board Bill 185. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. William Walker of the 7th Ward in support.
All right, Mr. Walker, Waller, excuse me. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability? I do. All right, 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you. I guess I'll start by introducing myself. I'm one of the managing attorneys at Arch City Defenders. I head up our criminal and municipal defense team. I'm here to testify in support of Board Bill 185. And I want to talk specifically about what I think is the single best case study for why this bill is essential, and that actually belies much of what Chief Tracy claimed about the transparency of the SLMPD. And I'll start by saying I was a public defender in the St. Louis City Trial Office from 2012 to 2015. Our office noticed in police reports references to a, quote, known law enforcement technique, unquote. That turned out to be Stingray, which you may also know as a cell site simulator. It is something the police have that effectively acts as a cell tower. It allows them, well, when it's turned on, it interferes with the use of any phone within a geographic radius, including calling 911. It allows them to know the exact location of each phone that is affected by it in that radius. It is able to access communication and data on each phone it connects with. And some versions are even able to install malware. I don't know that the SLMPD uses it for that. No one does, because we don't have a process like this. It seems pretty clear that Carpenter versus United States, a 2018 Supreme Court decision, requires a warrant for the use of something like Stingray. As far as I can tell, warrants were not being sought to use it. And talking to current public defenders, it is still in use. It is still actively being concealed. Back in 2015, there was a whole slate of news articles about how cases ended up dismissed, serious cases like robberies, because as soon as defense attorneys started prying, they would dismiss the case rather than discuss the technology that was used to locate things like phones. And I still can't find any public info about how SLMPD is using this technology, what sort of judicial oversight there is, what they're doing with the data they collect, what data they collect, how they're securing it. I would encourage you to ask Chief Tracy under oath if the department is using it. And I don't see them disclosing that they're using it or how, unless and until you pass some sort of legislation like this. I think the more invasive and powerful the surveillance technology, the greater the incentive they have, the more moral hazard there is for them to conceal its use.
That's your time. If you could please just finish your thought.
I'll just end by saying you have local control. This is a textbook case why it exists. If you don't use it for something like this, I don't know why there's so much political fighting going on to preserve it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Sean Mayer of the 9th Ward in support.
I'm gonna stick this here.
Sure.
Seems like a good idea.
It's almost like it was designed for it.
It's like a stand for a microphone.
All right. Green light on?
Green light's on. Okay.
Yep. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I do.
All right. 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Hi there. Yeah, I'm Sean Moyer. I am a resident of the 9th Ward, he, him pronouns. I'm the founder of a company called the Tretis Partners. We are a global information security consultancy. I break into computers for a living. I've been doing that for about 25 years. I'm also a member of the executive committee of St. Louis DSA. So the thing I want to tell you is not to trust technology. I'm going to tell you to trust people and trust transparency, especially security technology, as it turns out. And the reason why, I honestly don't know. The best answer I have is it's arrogance on the part of the people who designed these systems, the fact that a lot of these people are ex-military, ex-police, and they believe that they're better at security than anybody else. And
Sorry, I don't want to cut you off, Chair, but I don't think people at home can hear you.
Oh, I apologize. Yeah, I know me, I can't, I talk with my hands, so I'm trying to free that up. Okay, so, all right, cool, sorry. All right, so what we do as a firm is we get contracted by Silicon Valley and lots of other software companies and things like that to find vulnerabilities in software. And the reality is that those big marquee names pay firms like us to do that. Those smaller little companies that are selling niche services to municipalities and things like that don't have any security testing whatsoever. So when you're looking at these technologies, ask them if they've ever had an outside review of the claims that they make about the security, the accuracy, the reliability of these technologies, and you'll find out they never have. And interestingly enough, today, we just posted a blog post about a network surveillance technology that we reverse engineered and were able to turn into a wiretap by just being on the same Wi-Fi network as that technology, right? And that's a very common thing for us. We find these kind of vulnerabilities in technology all the time. There is one that actually was never fixed because we were embargoed by NDAs. It is for a webcam that is in this building in use that the vendor stopped supporting releasing software updates for about 4 years ago. And if you do a little Googling, you'll find out about it, because I can't actually say the name of the technology, but there was a massive botnet made up of those surveillance cameras. So anybody anywhere in the world on the internet could take over one of those cameras and see that data feed. And that's because those people never had any kind of security testing, and they were busy just shipping product and selling it, and those claims are often never verified or trusted. So that's what I'm trying to say to you is that's why you need that transparency and that oversight when you make technology selections for these kind of things. I want to be able to come up here and tell you, hey, that technology I just read about in the post that you're looking at right now is wildly insecure, and here's why. I'm not going to have a place in the public square to do that if that oversight doesn't exist and that decision is made in a smoke-filled room somewhere by a number of unelected people. So, what I'm asking you to do, again, is just not to trust the technology at face value. So, as an example, Humana trusted AI to make decisions about claims, and they're right now in the middle of a class action suit for those claims being denied.
That's your time. If you could just finish your thought.
Erroneously. By the same token, Air Canada is the first lawsuit where an AI advised a customer that they were eligible for a refund and they weren't, and they were held accountable for that AI decision. So these are more and more examples of just not trusting the technology at face value, and in order for that to happen, you need that kind of oversight and that public conversation to happen, and the only way that's going to happen is for this bill. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next, we have Scott Campus of Ward 10 in support.
All right, do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I do, yes.
All right, 3 minutes, please proceed.
Hello, I'm Scott Campus from Ward 10. As a resident of North City, I'm exposed to violent and petty street crime, but we must ask, how effective is surveillance? What is the cost of surveillance? It can be used as a tool, but it's demonstrably a threat. We rely on assurances of how license plate readers, cell site simulators, shot spotter surveillance cameras, facial recognition, and so on are used. A surveillance truck monitored an LGBTQ protest downtown. The existence of this vehicle has never been disclosed as far as I'm aware. Independent studies and even prosecutors for more than a decade consistently find that ShotSpotter does not decrease crime rates or increase clearance rates of cases, yet it led to many incidents of harassment and shooting at innocent people, sometimes fatally. We need protection from current and future technology operated by the city and those used by the city, such as the Task District and Amazon Ring Camera Network. The American reported that the city does not follow its own use policies. SLMPD covered up destroying a church property in one of many crashes and in a pattern of deception. A force investigative unit set up to review shootings and other uses of force acted more as a concealment unit, as revealed by excerpts of the department's own audit, yet it continues to hide this audit. An SLMPD officer was directed to stop testifying by a judge to avoid implicating the entire department in cooking search warrants, which the department was found to systematically be engaged in a decade before and promised then to fix. Officers sold hundreds of sensitive victim reports, leading to charges or indictments that in recent years total over 20 officers for abusing people in a variety of ways. Problems in the department are systemic. There must be meaningful checks. If the police department and mayor wish to build trust, they have an opportunity to begin accomplishing that. If St. Louis is to have any hope of solving its crime problem, it must clean up its police department. St. Louis is in the news in a negative light year after year. It is time that our city makes the news for progress. I ask that the board pass these modest yet meaningful measures, similar to those adopted from small towns to the largest cities.
Thank you.
Next, we have Ishmael from the 3rd Ward. We don't have a last name. We will need a last name.
Ishmael Moore.
All right. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
Yes.
All right, you have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Basically, why would anyone in this room want to be surveilled without this process in place? This is just increasing the transparency of our surveillance. And the BOA has worked and done a decent job recently to increase its transparency. So this is a great opportunity to continue that intention. It's really important that we enact this bill and not something that won't outlast the mayor however long or short the rest of her term may be, because there's no reason to circle back to this. We have the opportunity to do it now. And it's really important that this bill is enforceable. The lack of transparency that our police department has displayed in the last 5 years has not made them able to be trusted amongst other behaviors. So why would we believe without the opportunity to enforce their transparency that they would do it? And yeah, why are ShotSpotter microphones put where they're put? Does anyone here know that? How do we ensure that discriminatory practices and civil rights violations aren't happening without a process? So without Board Bill 185, the state of surveillance in St. Louis could get really creepy really quick, but we can do something about that right now, just like many other cities have.
Thank you. Yeah, you can just set it down. Thank you.
We have Rachel Hurtado from the 7th Ward in support.
All right. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
Yes.
All right. 3 minutes. Please proceed.
My name is Rachel Hurtado. I live in Ward 7, and I'm strongly in favor of Board Bill 185. And I want to address a few points of opposition on this bill. First, to the claim that Chief Tracy and the mayor's office makes that the cities that have implemented CCOPS have seen a rise in crime, specifically homicides, directly after implementing this legislation, specifically in Seattle and Oakland. This claim is based in junk science and, as Chief Tracy shared himself, biased anecdotal evidence from other police chiefs, plain and simple. According to public data from the Seattle Police Department, the CDC, and the FBI, it's notable that between 2013 and 2019, 1 in 10 people who have died by homicide in Seattle have been killed by a police officer. 1 in 10. The Seattle County Prosecutor's Office itself noted just a few months ago that there is no main cause for the rise in homicides, with no reference whatsoever to their CCOPS legislation being a contributing cause. Oakland passed CCOPS in 2018 and saw an increase in homicides from 2017 to 2023. One of the main factors of Oakland's homicide increase is not the passage of CCOPS, but rather the stripping and defunding of Oakland's non-carceral gun violence prevention program, Ceasefire, which intervened with community violence interrupters. If we're comparing what has happened in other cities with our own, this begs a major question about the ending of the Cure Violence program and the police department's role in the lack of clear data on the program's efficacy. We've also heard that making all the information about the types of surveillance technology that SLMPD uses will tip off criminals and make it harder to solve crime. If SLMPD believes this is true, this is in direct contradiction to their reasons for supporting the automated traffic enforcement legislation. In the case of Board Bill 105, they're saying that visibility and awareness of technology like red light cameras would deter crime. So which is it? Does the public knowledge of surveillance technology increase crime or deter it? A major concern being raised here is that Board Bill 185 would create logistical concerns for SLMPD's functioning by overburdening them. Let me be clear. Submitting a use plan for types of surveillance technology and giving the community one hearing, one opportunity to voice our opinions is a more than reasonable expectation for a police department that receives more funding in the city budget than any other department. Holding SLMPD to reasonable standards of transparency and oversight by the community is the bare minimum for St. Louis, a city that has been plagued by racialized, unchecked, and often secret surveillance utilized by the police department. St. Louis needs community control over police surveillance now, as enforced legislation that is not dependent on the current police chief's possible willingness to do a presentation, and as future-proofed
That's your time. If you could just finish your thought.
and as future-proofed legislation that will outlast the current administration's executive order. Thanks.
Next, we have Lee Harkins of the 5th Ward in support.
All right. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I swear.
All right. 3 minutes. Please proceed.
My name is Lee. I live in Ward 5, and I am testifying in support of Board Bill 185. Police use surveillance technology to target members of our community, Black people, brown people, queer people, activists, and unhoused people. We need police to stop surveillance altogether, and Board Bill 185 is a bare minimum for St. Louis. Take ShotSpotter. We invest millions into ShotSpotter each year, and the evidence does not show that it prevents crime or accurately detects gunshots. In fact, it sends officers on high alert into situations with no gunshots when they are not needed and put them in a very overpowering and violent place where they can inflict violence on people in our communities. And as a few people brought up, the study of iWired showed that where ShotSpotter even was in St. Louis, which none of us even knew, which is crazy considering that you all decided to spend $10 million on it in the budget cycle. And we just found out, all of us, the other day from a leaked article. Cops always lie. Surveillance technologies are used to exploit communities, and we have no idea how the data collected in our communities is tracked, if it's stored safely, who it is given access to. And we don't even know what data the police collects on themselves and chooses to wipe. Board Bill 185 would put the power of surveillance accountability into the Board of Aldermen, where the bare minimum we and speak our mind on it. And I know that there's a CCOPS executive order passed by the barrier, but like many people said, that's going to expire when her term expires. And this bill is a bare minimum once again. 23 other cities have already done this. There's no reason St. Louis can't do this. I want things that keep my community safe, and surveillance does not keep me safe. At the bare minimum, I have a right to know what data is being collected on me, just like everybody has that right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Inez Bordeaux of the 3rd Ward in support.
Hello again, Ms. Bordeaux. Hello. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
Yes.
All right, 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you to Alderman Aldridge for working with the community on this bill and listening to our input and taking our feedback and applying it. You have no idea how much that means, not just to the people that you worked with, but with our communities. This is the goal. CCOPS is needed because police surveillance in St. Louis is unchecked and running rampant. We know just from last week with the leaked ShotSpotter data that there are microphones all over this city. I bet most of you on the Public Safety Committee did not know of the existence and the number of microphones that are predominantly in Black and brown communities. We don't know what's happening with the Real-Time Crime Center. We don't know how much money they spend, how much data they collect, what they do with it, who they sell it to, who has access to it. We don't know any of that because there is no legislation requiring that the police share that information. It is not too much to ask to know how surveillance technology is being used in our communities, how much it costs, especially since we know surveillance is disproportionately in Black and brown communities. It is not onerous to ask SLMPD to release a report once a year explaining the surveillance technology. And if SLMPD feels that transparency and accountability are simply too much to bear, that should be concerning not just to every person in the room, every person in this committee, it should be concerning to every person in the city. Any police department that tells you they don't need oversight is a police department in desperate need of oversight. Executive Order 78 doesn't include any oversight or enforcement. To be frank, the Executive Order 78 is a tepid attempt to undermine the work of community-based organizations that have been doing this for many years. And like other people have said, and I think it bears repeating, that an executive order is only good for as long as that administration is in power. And based on how things are going, I would be extremely surprised if this administration was still in power come May of 2020. The pushback coming from the mayor's office and the police chief is anecdotal, fact-free, and not at all based
That is your time.
reality.
If you could just wrap up your thought.
Yeah, okay. So, like I was saying, the pushback is anecdotal, fact-free, and not at all based in reality, and should be seen for what it is: an attempt to maintain the status quo of secrecy, cover-ups, lack of accountability, and blatant disregard for the will of the people. And that is the very reason why I support and why we should all be supporting CCOPS.
All right, thank you.
You online, on Zoom, we have 7 people, but only 3 are wanting to speak. And the first person we have up is Tracy Stanton.
All right. Ms. Stanton, do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
Yes, I do.
All right, you have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Tracy Stanton, a 5th Ward resident for 4 years, and I'm a deeply invested member of the community, committed to safety, health, well-being of all residents, particularly those that are most vulnerable amongst us. Today, I'm here, a strong advocate for the passage of Board Bill 185, an ordinance that would allow the community an opportunity to see cops. I find it extremely worrisome that there is any opposition to this bill. What is the issue for allowing us to see cops in the same way that they want to see and surveil us? This ordinance is not merely a regulation of technology. It is fundamentally about racial equity and ensuring that marginalized communities, particularly Black and Brown individuals, can navigate their own neighborhoods without fear of being surveyed and mistaken for someone else. And although I sternly agree with this statement, these are not my words. They are the words of your mayor, Tashara Jones, that she so profoundly vocalized in 2021. The history of systemic and historical surveillance of Black bodies has righteously perpetuated deep-seated mistrust and validated the fear that our community holds in regards to police and any form of surveillance. Embedded in the passing of this ordinance is an opportunity to address the issues of mistrust head-on. Every time the community speaks up about the need to defund SLMPD or the need of community-based systems of safety, the state actors and the police claim that the relationship between the community and the police can be mended, quote, air quotes, or repaired, and that building community trust is the way forward. And while I do not agree with a portion of that statement, I do believe that through accountability and transparency is deeply ingrained in trust. Accountability is not a destination, it is a skill that we can build and practice, is in an art and a craft and an alchemy that we can learn how to wield, just as we have learned how to wield hurt and shame and fear. If accountability is a skill that we all value, then we must make room and make commitments to practice it in our daily lives. And we can start with small ways like this bill. The CCOPS ordinance empowers local communities by giving them a significant role in decision-making process regarding the funding, acquisition, and the use of surveillance technology. It allows that any deployment of such technologies is subject to thorough scrutiny and public input, preventing their unchecked proliferation without oversight. This level of transparency is essential for safeguarding civil liberties while simultaneously promoting public safety. Moreover, the ordinance mandates that surveillance technology cannot be funded, acquired, or utilized without first considering their potential impact on civil rights and civil liberties. This provision is crucial for the protection of private practices and privacy of people. Additionally, requiring the Board of Aldermen's approval for this surveillance technologies ensures the democratic accountability and prevents any more compounded abuse of power that the police already
Ms. Stanton,
use.
that is your time. If you could just wrap up your thought.
Yes, so I urge you all to support Board Bill 185 and join the growing movement for community control over police surveillance that has begun in 2016 and join the other 23 cities that have joined. And lastly, 9 members of this current BOA have previously co-sponsored this bill or stated that they were in support prior to their election. Thank you all. Have a great day. Peace and power.
Thank you.
Next, we have Liz Kramer.
Hello.
Ms. Kramer, do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
Yes.
All right, you have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Great, thank you. Hi, my name is Liz Kramer. I'm a resident of the 7th Ward. I'm speaking today as a representative of the Community Mobility Committee, an advisory group made up of residents who are committed to creating a safer, more accessible experience for people who are getting around by walking, transit, biking, and other modes of transportation. Our committee is in favor of Board Bill 185 because we believe people should feel confident in their ability to move around without fear of surveillance or harassment. At the same time, we advocate for automated enforcement, a specific type of surveillance technology, which could help to address the dangerous conditions on our streets. In St. Louis, like much of the rest of the country, enforcement of traffic laws has been used as a pretext for racist, deadly interactions between residents and police. Studies find that speed cameras that are well positioned can help reduce injury crashes as much as 37%. While we believe that these technologies must be implemented in a way that is transparent, accountable, and protects people's civil liberties, we want to see the following in legislation that provides oversight over the process for all surveillance technology. And we want to see automated enforcement in use on St. Louis's streets as soon as possible. Our 5 requests are clear and accountable transparency about technology usage. We really appreciate that this bill includes a system of reporting that goes not only to the alders, but to the public. We need a consistent mechanism for the public to report concerns about surveillance technology of all kinds. We need to be tracking the impact and effect of technology and making data-driven changes to their use. For red light and speed cameras, this means looking to see where cameras are generating a lot of fine revenue, but are not improving outcomes, a sign that infrastructure must change for driver behavior to improve. We need to make sure that a system of regulation and oversight doesn't replicate our fractured system of individualized local control. We don't want neighbors to be able to approve or disapprove the location of individual speed cameras, nor do we want technology citing to be at the whims of older people. We want systems that can evolve as technology and expectations about driver behavior evolve, or any behavior. If technology allows monitoring of device uses in a way that's legal, we'd want to have options that prevent further distracted driving. And finally, we want to be sure that the changes to this regulation of surveillance technology doesn't cut us off from opportunities to collect critical data and assist in positive behavior. This includes things like bicycle counters, cameras that record and analyze near-miss collisions, or assistive technology to city fleet vehicles. As transportation advocates, we're certainly not experts in surveillance technologies, but we believe with protections and oversight in place, these tools could be part of the toolbox to make our roads safer for residents of St. Louis. Most importantly, this is the beginning of a conversation about how public safety can be so much more than enforcement and surveillance. In our ideal world, there would be no need for automated traffic enforcement because we would have a built environment that supports safe driving at all times and a culture that prioritizes people's life and safety and well-being over speed and convenience. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Joe Johnson.
Mr. Johnson.
Hello, my name is Joe Johnson. I represent SMS
M-
Novel.
Mr. Johnson, could you turn your camera on? Oh, there we go. All right. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I do.
All right. You have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Name is Joe Johnson, future resident of the 3rd Ward. Very thankful for this meeting and the time to be able to discuss Bill 185. As someone who has frequented St. Louis much and also as a future resident, I stand in opposition to Bill 185, recognizing that our police are understaffed, under-resourced. I believe that any more form of bureaucracy that would prevent the high rates of homicide, crime, and property theft in St. Louis would actually be detrimental to the health and safety of the most vulnerable citizens, which in St. Louis, when it comes to crime, oftentimes are African Americans. African Americans, we experience violence in St. Louis about 2.5 times more than white. We also are arrested at about 3 times the rate. I do feel and sense that there's somewhat of a hypocrisy in some of the leadership in the aldermen. I do want to address a statement that Mrs. Saunier, Alderman Saunier, stated about our company when she made a statement to the news stating that a drone company created by an African-American business owner was exploitative and caused fear-mongering. I think if we want to hear Black voices, we shouldn't demonize Black voices that try to create solutions for crime in St. Louis and other cities. I've also heard from another gentleman who spoke. I think his name is Mr. Jake Lyon. Jake Lyon, I think his last name is apropos, Lionfield, if I'm not mistaken, when he called our drone plan a scheme. I feel that is completely disrespectful. As someone who had his mother shot publicly in the community, I'm someone who was affected by crime personally. As an African American, I'm someone who's affected by crime. So I believe if we're going to hear and advocate for people of color, especially as many of our white brothers and sisters have done that, we need to be willing to hear from African American brothers and sisters who are trying to lead a forefront in being able to use technology in a communal sense that'll be beneficial to the community. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Yeah, come on. Is there anyone further?
No, we have no others to speak. We only have written.
Okay.
That's it.
We'll acknowledge the written testimony now.
We have 21 written testimonies in the drive that's in support and 2 that oppose.
All right. Thank you. And then.
Excuse me. I was granted permission but tell me if I have it.
Is this person signed up?
Yes, in the chat function, which was disabled, but in the question and answer, yeah, go ahead and answer.
And what is your first and last name, please?
My name is Tess Sanders. I'm a resident of the 7th Ward, and I work in Dutchtown.
All right. Well, Ms. Sanders, do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I do.
All right. You have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you for having me. I'm here to support Board Bill 185 and to say that we cannot afford this high spiritual cost of surveillance. Just as we cannot afford to become desensitized to the sound of gunfire, like the sound of the ocean if we're living at the beach, we can't afford to dehumanize one another any longer. And looking through technology can never replace relationship. As the gentleman who works for the company that he basically said, like, their job is to hack computers, that's one example of the way that real relationships between human beings, seeing with our minds and our hearts and our eyes, the God-given technology we have is sufficient to take care of one another if we would only be given an opportunity. And it's sensible and definitely valid for the people who pay taxes, who are supposed to be protected by the police department, to understand and to know, like, what are you doing with this technology? What is it even? Do I understand it? Can we try? Can we talk about it to understand it together? At least Board Bill 185 will give us the opportunity to arrive at that understanding. Without it, we have no chance. Civil liberties are important, and to become a community that sees through the lens of technology that we know is designed to actually not see the people at all, only to see them as liabilities based on racism, based on anti-Black policy that persists. To see people through that lens will never create a beloved community in St. Louis. And so, yeah, I'm in favor of Board Bill 185 for that reason, not just Executive Order 78, like everybody said. It's temporary. So please, 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 thank you for your service and consider backing Board Bill 185. Blessings.
Thank you. All right, so that is the end of
Public comment I would like to provide.
Sure. Were you signed up?
Yes.
Okay. And what is your name?
Maya Lee.
All right. Ms. Lee, do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I'm sorry, I don't see Maya Lee's name on here. What's your name?
Maya Lee.
Did you sign one of these?
Yeah, I had signed it. I provided written comment as well. Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, you have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
All right, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Again, my name is Maya Lee. I work out of the 9th Ward. Okay, thank you. So I wanted to speak because I am a community organizer with Freedom Community Center, which is a Black-led nonprofit organization deeply committed to Black liberation work here in St. Louis City. We organize directly with survivors of state violence, such as informally incarcerated individuals. Through this position, I am privileged to hear the thoughts and feelings of the Black St. Louis community. There is a long history of systemic racism in the criminal justice system, which has created a distrust for law enforcement. I'm providing this testimony to amplify the voices of directly impacted survivors of violence that we have built relationships with that share the sentiment of distrust due to their lived experiences. Resoundingly, the community wants oversight of the police. We are currently in the dark with no idea how police technology is surveilling us and no idea how that data is being used. Due to how targeted the Black St. Louis community is by police, it is easy to infer that this technology is being used to support racist police practices. When asked to report on surveillance tech practices, the police have failed to provide any information. The police have set a clear precedent that we cannot rely on their department for this oversight. We are asking the alders to use their position to pass a strong, comprehensive police oversight bill. And again, thank you for this opportunity. We ask that you use it to protect the most marginalized among us. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now, no more surprises on the Zoom or, oh, one more, okay. And have you signed up? All right. And what was your name?
Juliana Nicodemus. If you would give me like 2 seconds to catch my breath, I ran in here.
Oh, sure. So, do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
Yes.
All right, you have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Hello, my name is Juliana Nicodemus, and I'm a resident of the First Ward. I care deeply about public safety in St. Louis, which is why I am testifying in support of Board Bill 185. It's no secret that public trust and opinion in the police are low, especially in St. Louis. That's why passing a community control over police surveillance bill would be a step in the right direction. If the police care about their relationship with the people they serve, they should also support this bill. As taxpaying citizens funding this surveillance, we deserve to know how it's being used and how ineffective it is in decreasing crime. The mayor's recent executive order is not enough to provide the lasting enforcement and accountability needed to make sure this vast amount of surveillance information is not being abused. The police department already has a track record of not doing what they say they'll do. They failed to submit their required annual report for the last 5 years. Without accountability, that won't change. And it should be noted that the executive order is only good for however long Mayor Char Jones is in office. We need lasting legislation that offers an effective, long-term solution rather than a short-term, weaker executive order. A spokesperson for Mayor Jones said some of the bill's language has, quote, the impact of curtailing or obstructing police investigation work, slowing it down by subjecting it to uncertain approval processes by an inherently political entity and forcing breaches of contracts for surveillance technology currently in use, end quote. However, the approval process is clearly defined, and this approval is not necessary every single time that they use surveillance. Instead, approval is required once for the type of technology and its stated purpose. After that, it's just recertification every year. Submitting documentation of what they're doing is not curtailing or obstructing. We have to submit documentation every year for taxes, so why shouldn't they? The only obstruction is for inappropriate use. Additionally, if our inherently political Congress can make legislative decisions, then so can our Board of Aldermen. Lastly, the only breaches of contract would occur if it's found that the current use of surveillance technology is inappropriate. The truth is, the police department has made many claims without providing supporting evidence. Police Chief Robert Tracy said, quote, we have guardrails in place to protect people's civil liberties, end quote. However, there's been little to no consistent communication on what those guardrails are, and there's no way of knowing if the police are practicing what they preach. There's more evidence supporting the distrust than there is abating it. Passing Board Bill 185 is a step in the right direction towards improving public safety and trust. Chief Tracy said at the beginning of his...
That's your time, if you could just finish your thought.
Okay, Chief Tracy said at the beginning of his appointment, to quote him, quote, "I will work to give you a police force that is accountable and accessible, but I need your help too. Safer communities don't just happen. It's a mutual obligation we all have, and it can only happen when we work together," end quote. This bill is us trying to work together.
Thank you. All right, is that everyone now? Okay. All right, Alderman Aldridge, you are recognized.
I did forget to mention that Ms. Arnez Bardot is my expert witness, and I think she had about 10 more minutes of things that she wanted to speak on, so I'll just, okay. At this point, I'm open to discussion and any questions from my colleagues.
So I have some questions, but I'll wait to see if my colleague here gets on them before I do. So we'll just go down the list in seniority. Alderman Oldenburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Alderman.
Good afternoon.
I'm admiring all your work on this, my friend, so I appreciate you bringing this discussion forward to the board and to the community. I have a question regarding the approval process by the Board of Aldermen.
Yes, sir.
I know in Section 2 is where that kind of states that it's mandatory, I believe, that the Board of Aldermen, any city entity receives approval from the Board of Aldermen. I'm on page 5 of the copy I have, the top of the page, number 1, Section 2, right? Board of Aldermen approval mandatory.
Mm-hmm.
And in your remarks, you mentioned that it would take the form of how we adopt resolutions.
Correct.
Is that anywhere in here, that instruction set?
Section 2, line 7AA, the city entity must obtain by the Board of Aldermen approval. Such approval shall take the form of a resolution.
Oh, wow, yeah, it is. It's right there. Okay, great. Okay. Appreciate that. That's
No
good.
problem.
Why is that not in my set? Okay. So I know you and I spoke yesterday about that very process, and I would think board bills can get caught in political quagmire just as much as resolution adoption. So I'm still waiting to see how we counter what could be a very long and egregious fight among each surveillance technology, or when the technology is getting improved and it's seeking said approval, that they could get stalled from political beefing, quite honestly. So politics at play could very much stall any city entity wanting to increase technology. I still don't know if you're open to how that gets addressed.
Yes, and I will be transparent. I mean, I think there's two avenues. One that we already have at our, under Ordinance 3.063, Ordinance 3.06.030, that does allow the mayor and the president, it's not in this one, allows the mayor and president, mainly more president, to call for like a special session, right? And I know if we've done that like on airport grants and whatnot. And in having conversation with the community, I've also told them that there is language that we should look at. And if you have ideas, Alderman, please, appreciate having a conversation the other day. Want to work with this community. How do we put language in the piece of legislation that allows for the legislation to move and not to get held up, or the resolution. And even if the committee, decides no, we should still allow for a time frame for that legislation to move. And I know there is a section in the bill.
I just realized, I'm sorry, I don't have the substitute, so that's why I didn't see the prior one in that, but continue.
It should be, it was on the table. The committee sub was,
I didn't
the
get
clerk
it.
printed
That's
it.
all right, I'll get it.
Okay. I think Alderwoman Clark Hubbard copies down here, if you want to borrow hers. There's also language in the, and I gotta find it, there's language in the bill that says, once the department provide the surveillance use plan or them trying to go out for technology, there's 21 days where that has to go in front of the board.
Okay.
And like I say, look into potentially tying that language up because, again, we're not trying to, in my opinion, not trying to stall the process, but the point of it is more oversight of the process.
Sure. How will it be determined which alderperson carries the?
So once I think, and we've talked about that too, it would be, just like now, departments, like we've had several grants that come through. If it's a grant from the health department or like Slate, the director reached out to me and said, hey, Alderman, you've been involved with Slate. I'd love for you to carry it. The grant has already went through ENA, so it would be up to the department discretion. It could be language where it's always the chair, but say the chair is sick and he doesn't be able to make it, but it would be up to the police department to say, here's
The entity bringing proposal to find the
Yes, sir.
sponsor of the resolution. Okay.
Correct.
I still have concern because I think we're seeing this very point played out in real time. We have a technology enhancement in Board Bills 105 and 106 that were introduced 5 months ago. 5 months ago. And it's been stalled, thwarted, blocked by the president's office until we see this very piece of legislation. So we have a technology that police experts have said will help save lives, will help calm traffic violence, and we can't pass it and implement it because the president's office is holding it hostage until Board Bill 185 gets passed. And these are public statements that have been made that we will see no red light or speeding camera enforcement bill until we see the passage of Board Bill 185. That's 5 months of a project and or camera projects and a technology enhancement being held up. So therein lies, I think, the very example that we're seeing in front of us. Political beefing between the president's office and the mayor's office is holding up cameras and their ability to save lives.
Can I respond?
Sure.
I got this. Thank you. One, I would say, I know the president has made it very clear that we want to see when we do enforcement, because enforcement is necessary. No matter if you stay north, south, central, west end, we all want to live in safe communities. The reality is a lot of communities up north are a lot more unsafer because of lack of opportunities. It's not just public safety, but due to lack of opportunity, maybe other neighborhoods. So again, no one, I would say, I know at this board, we've passed a lot of enforcement things that can help public safety. If we go back to when Alderwoman Kara Spencer had the concealed carry, at the same time I had the right to know bill, which at the time the chief said also wasn't, the best thing to do. And that bill just became ordinance and the clerk sent it out all to the Board of Aldermen yesterday. I think it's important if we do enforcement, how do we ensure that when we come from the city of 10 years later of this year, Ferguson, there's still some mistrust between communities and our police department. Not saying that we're against them, but mistrust that we have. And I think a bill like this would help. When it comes to the traffic red light camera bill, we also know that that bill was ruled unconstitutional. I think the public safety chair probably got thoughts on that. But how do we also not rush legislation and get it in the right language so we do not get overruled, as well as talking to community members? This bill has been through various phases, or I had a surface parking lot, and I'm not going to try to get off topic, but that was filed in September. It took several months for me to make sure I sit down with the operators, I sit down with community, that it's in the right place. And we just had a hearing on this board just had a hearing on the red light camera bill yesterday. I know that Alderman Cone is working diligently to make sure it gets out, but I also will push back on when we say stalled. No matter if that bill was passed back in 5 months ago, we would have had to go out for RFP for that bill. We would have to make sure that it passed legal muster, that it wouldn't get sued. And even if we have red light cameras on every corner right now, those cameras wouldn't prevent what happened like at the Drake concert. It's about how do we change the mind and cultures of our drivers. It could be preventive, but that's not going to happen in 1 year either.
I hear that, and I thank you for responding. I would say we're still 5 months behind of what should be a result of sort of, politics, quite honestly. I do understand, the argument that what happened after the Drake concert may not have been prevented with cameras. I think it's an anecdotal argument on both sides. My opinion was the driver of that incident didn't have a past criminal record, was not violent, but clearly was driving reckless. And I think in a lot of professional police minds, probably not the first time he was reckless driving, right? If someone's driving that reckless, the hypothesis is they've probably driven reckless before. Perhaps if there was a camera that was ticketing him and automated enforcement technology, and he had received a few of those tickets, maybe he's thinking twice before doing that again. Maybe. So I would argue it could be prevented. Again, I think we're dancing on the heads of pins with some of that argument. Overwhelmingly, I think most reasonable people can believe that technology for the police department is a force multiplier and that it can prevent crimes. So I would argue that that's true, and I also saying that we're 5 months behind the 8 ball now because we haven't solidified Board Bill 185 in order for 105 and 106 to move forward. I just think that's a clear-cut case of the kind of road we could get in. You've been members of 2 political bodies, Alderman, so I think you know that politics can get at play, and the power of the president's office to control legislation when we get behind the curtain is meaningful and impactful, and it can be shut down. We hardly ever in the 7 years that I've been a member of the Board of Aldermen have seen a discharge, so that if something is trapped in a committee, that the members of the Board of Aldermen, discharge it from that. So that rule rarely gets implemented. So I would love to work with you to figure out a way how we can sort of take the politics out of it so it doesn't get personal when we desperately want to see crime-fighting technology installed in our community.
I appreciate that, Alderman. I'm willing to work with you to figure out, like you say, that time frame. I think being in a body of politics, that's always going to have politics, everything. If we don't do this, right, say we get a different mayor, a different comptroller, and a different president.
Yeah.
The budget process go through E&A, and say if they take money out of a certain line item, people would say that's political, and maybe some of the things they ran. So, I think there's some language we could look at. So like you say, the concern doesn't get held up in the process, and definitely willing to sit down and continue to work with you on it.
And thank you. And would you consider, and you don't have to answer, we can think about it, but would you consider a deemed approved mechanism? Whereas if it is sort of a 6-month process before a project is getting approved, simply after it's gone through the steps, the plans have been submitted, et cetera, that it would just be deemed approved because it's stuck in the Board of Aldermen?
I think we could put language in there that forces it to come to committee and to the floor, where it doesn't just get automatically approved. I hear what you're saying, and to be transparent, I told the committee, and please say yes, or I told community members, I don't want it to be held up because we don't do our job. If we make a decision or we don't, it shouldn't be held up. So I think there's some language that it could be used to make sure that the timeline flows, as long as there's still input from the community through our current process that we currently have through committee and to the full board.
That's a fair response, and I appreciate that. I have one more question, and I can just get at through the rest of the members, and I appreciate it, Alderman. There is a emergency provision, right, of 30 days in here, and I'm still messing with the old copy, but
Yeah, so that is the
explain that to me real quick.
Section 11, technical extensional circumstances. So again, if there's like an emergency that the department would need to get a technology for whatever emergency pop up, right? There's a
So by example,
mass killer.
there's a witness that maybe needs to get protected, and all of a sudden technology is ever changing, and it can enhance and pick up movement up to 9,000 miles away, something like that, whereby a camera needs to get installed in front of a witness's house, and that can happen very quickly. But then within 30 days?
Within
they
30
come
days,
back?
and if in this emergency, and the thought of that, if it's emergency, it's because it's a quick thing. It's not
Right.
like this is a technology I need for your process. It's
Yeah.
like,
Well, my point is that technology could exist. Maybe it exists.
yeah, and we
Here's an
don't
instance,
have it.
wow,
and
we
they
really need
found out
this
about
because
it. There is there's exemption in there for 30 days that they could be able to acquire it, but after that 30 days, they would have to go through the process. They wouldn't be able to use it. They would have to go through the process to continue using that technology.
Okay. That's great. Alderman, thank you. You've given me a lot to think about. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, are you on the call?
I am, but it's going back and forth on whether, I don't know if you can hear me or see me or not.
I
So
can
I
hear you,
won't
but I
go
can't
and
see
lengthen
you.
Okay. I won't go and lengthen my comments just other than to thank Alderman Aldridge again for all of his work and continued efforts on this legislation that, as he noted, is not the first time that we have heard and tried to champion and work for this. I want to absolutely thank the two constituents from the 10th Ward, too, that spoke here, and the constituents from the 10th Ward that are watching and have not so much have given me comment, not so much and not support of the bill, but are a little confused about some of the, and want a little more context now after some of the comments and testimonies that they heard today. So I'm encouraged and inspired by that. Everybody knows I like the committee experience. I like to be able to hear and work with the community on moving things forward. So again, thank you, and I look forward to continuing to work with you, Alderman Aldridge, as well as the rest of my colleagues to get this done.
Thank you, Alderwoman.
All right. Thank you. Alderwoman Keys, are you on the call? All right. If okay, then Alderwoman Velasquez.
Thank you, Alderman Aldrich, for all your hard work. Bill, I have no questions at this time.
Alderwoman Saunier.
Thank you. I just want to start by doing what everyone else did, just commend you and thank you for bringing this bill forward. I think, you know, this can be a difficult process to navigate all of the community voices, to navigate all of the advocates, to navigate the police department, to navigate the president's office, to navigate the mayor's office all at once. And so I just want to make sure that I commend you for doing that, but also sticking true to your values. I just had a question in regards to this bill, and a little bit kind of in response to some of the things that Alderman Oldenburg mentioned. Can you talk a little bit about your experiences of like having conversations and talking to the departments? I think our committee process is very public, but a lot of the other conversations are very much behind the scenes. So just in regards to you just kind of describing your process of working on this bill and bringing this legislation forward, because I noted that today when you asked the police chief, you know, what specific parts of the bill did he have an issue with or would he like to talk about further, he didn't really say on public record. So I think it just might be helpful for you to give some context to your conversations, especially because obviously committee is to work on bills, but I know it can be difficult to work on a bill if someone can't identify data that supports what they're saying, and also if they can't specifically point to what the issue is.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think everybody at this body, I think this new body of 14, all the people are doing like a fantastic job. And sometimes when we have legislation that's in front of us that's not brought by departments, because we know sometimes a lot of it's brought by departments. It's written up, it's given to us. It's usually a grant. Those move a little quicker because the department is trying to get what they need, and we want the department to be able to function. But sometimes when you're bringing new ideas, I'm sure if it was like, a bill called like TADA or different bills around drones or stuff like that, not being back serious, it does take some time to potentially get departments to meet. I think our departments are doing great. They also are understaffed, right? So they're trying to run some of these offices on shoestrings on top of when older people come to them, because we're not experts in everything. I know that's a concern. People say, how do we make sure we're an expert in this, right? Well, we make decisions on streets. We make decisions on accounting through the budget. We make decisions on a lot of things. And sometimes we have to get that information through the department, and it doesn't always happen as quickly. Doesn't a sit down with a chief isn't always as quick, because he's the chief of the city of St. Louis. He's got a lot he's managing, or through the buildings commission, they got a lot that they're managing. So when we get through legislation, just because we file the bill doesn't always mean, and a lot of pieces of legislation aren't always the same piece that you filed. It's going to be things through community groups that they may love and don't, things through the department they may not love and don't, and that's how you get to I think a really core piece of legislation. But it takes time to get that community input. But even from our departments here, it takes time for them to sometimes get back to all the people, and that's not just because we send a legal opinion. Sometimes we get those legal opinions back a month later, so we don't know how do we move on the piece of legislation. I mean, we could move without those experts, but I think members of this board are trying to do it in a way that isn't just reactionary, but it's going to be something that's going to be effective.
Thank you. And my other question for you, when you were working on this bill, can you talk a little bit about, we've talked about the places CCOPs have been implemented, and I know the police chief said that he found that it increased crime. So I would just love to know, what did you find when you were doing your research and having your conversation?
Well,
and if you have data, that's great too, or specific cities you can reference.
Yeah, I would say, this, since I've picked up this bill going back, it's been since Mr. Kennedy in 2019, then Mr. Collins Muhammad a year after that. He filed it twice, and then Miss Annie Rice, and then Alderwoman Velasquez started a lot of great pieces that are in this bill, and also worked on it and brought communities to the table. So since I've kind of been part of that conversation, working in collaboration with some of my colleagues, I would say, I've learned a lot about CCOPs or oversight of surveillance technology. And in that, one of the things that I constantly hear is that since it's been implemented, crime has went up. So I wanted to do my homework and do some research, and I'll say, so in the city or New York City, homicides decreased once CCOPs was introduced in 2020. The year before that, homicides was at 462. It had went down to 386. In Detroit, homicides decreased since CCOPs was introduced in 2021. In fact, the number of homicides in Detroit in 2023 was at their lowest since 1966. I think it's hard to point to one piece of technology that says it increased. We can look here at our own backyard. Since we brought the Real-Time Intelligence Center to the city of St. Louis, I think that was back in about 2015 and 16. We've seen for several years, outside of this last year, high numbers of crime in the city of St. Louis. I think last year was our lowest in 10 years. But all them years before that, there was no CCOPs. But just even here in our own backyard, we've seen how crime was on an increase. And I think we also have to remember, during the pandemic, urban cities and cities all across the city seen a rise in crime. Post-pandemic, people losing their jobs, mental health, and so many other things where crime has went up. So I don't think we can say, one piece of legislation is due to that. When you tie in housing, when you tie in jobs, when you tie in economics, when you tie in education, it's all those things that, when we look at crime, we have to look at those crime numbers.
Thank you. The last part of my statement is not really a question for you. It's just something I want to put on record in response to Alderman Oldenburg. You know, in my opinion, I think that the police department is an inherent political entity. The chief is appointed by the mayor. The budget is approved by us, and that budget is 51% of our dollars that come from the public. So for me, this is a political process. And I think too, again, we can say, well, you know, I'm concerned about how long this will take, but I think it's telling that Michael Brown was murdered 10 years ago, and just yesterday, for the first time, our policies by the police department were posted. So how far behind are we in accountability and transparency? I want to make sure I'm acknowledging the processes that are happening, but at the same time, we are so far behind, and we can't pretend like this isn't inherently a political thing. And I think that's true for all communities, but certainly true for Black and brown communities, certainly true for folks who are going to be seeking abortion, certainly true for people who are seeking transgender affirming care, places that we know that our state has targeted and is actively right now. They just tried to prevent people who get abortions from getting Medicare and Medicaid. So I think that it's inherently political, and I hope that when you and Alderman Aldridge have you all's concerns, that whatever the conversation is, and totally think there should be some conversations, but I think in some ways there's no way to walk around hard conversations. There's no way to walk around decisions that are being made. There's no way to depoliticize that because it's already political. We're just talking about whether or not it's going to be transparent, accountable, and whether or not communities are going to have input into that process. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. I just have a couple quick questions, and I want to be super fast because I want to get STL TV out of here. I realize we're right at the 5 o'clock hour. So can you explain to me the decision to exclude special tax districts from this?
So that was a decision that was made before my time in an older version in this piece of legislation. I think, you know, we need to look at legislation for special tax districts in a different setting and how they're being used, how people can implement them. Some communities can afford that half-cent tax just to stay safer. Some can't. But I know that was something that was negotiated out with the previous alderperson and some of the people from the special tax district, as well as.
Okay, so it's not new with your.
It's not new.
Okay. That answers it for me. I was just trying to figure out if you're what the reasoning behind it was, but if it's not your reasoning,
I mean, I will say that, you know, with the special tax districts, again, the goal is the oversight of the dollars that come from like the city of St. Louis residents. When you do a special tax district, yes, they're putting their dollars into it, but it's a select few, right? We're not trying to stop folks from, if I know that's one of the concerns, private people being able to put their technology there, right? It's more about the oversight of knowing if they do it, if they're using the same technology as cameras that they're tying into the police, and nothing completely different, but not trying to stop their process.
Okay, understood. Yeah, I just we've heard a lot about equity here today, and it seems like we're creating a two-tiered system.
I would say special tax districts in general. That's why it's kind of we see a lot of those in Central West End, South St. Louis. I don't think there's one special tax district in Northside. I probably could be wrong, but I agree. I think, you know, with legislation, it's some giving and taking. You can't get everything. And that was a concern before my time that was put in, that was left in. But I do think there's a long-term conversation we need to have about those tax districts. Two of them we just approved in the Central West End a few weeks ago, you know, that other wards can't have.
Sure. So moving along, section 3, so I guess page 7, lines, starting at line 11. So page 7, line 11. In the surveillance use plan, you talk about various city entities that may weigh in on this if this were to pass. Would you be opposed to having some input from the city councilor's office or some legal input, just someone who's keeping track of the actual like court decisions on constitutional rights and things like that?
I wouldn't be opposed to it on page 9 through 11. You know, the Board of Aldermen, the way our process is, and, you know, we want to make sure we have experts come in. I think we had a a community member that was an expert come in, that was great, right? But and any chair can call any person to come and testify, right? But I know that was something of like, how do we make sure we have the right information all the time when we're talking about this? So on that line through 9 through 11, there are agencies from the Civil Rights Agency Division, the Division of Civil Oversight, and then the Informational Technology Department. And you know, making sure legally things are right, because maybe legally they aren't being right through the department. I wouldn't be opposed that the city councilor would have the ability to be an expert to weigh in during that public process.
I'm just thinking someone who is, you know, keeping track of the various legal decisions that courts make surrounding Fourth Amendment rights, just as we move forward. But I'm certainly happy to work with you on any of that. And then the last one's just kind of a nuts and bolts question. And it may be in here. I haven't had the chance to really sit down and go through this line by line yet. But is there anything to account for the Board of Aldermen being on break?
So there isn't anything that accounts for the Board of Aldermen being on break. That is, you know, conversations that are, you know, a thought that was had. I will say again, when the Board of Aldermen is on break, the president can call us back into session. And a lot of times when these grants happen, there's a notice that these grants are going to happen, so they go to the alderperson ahead of time before our break or whatnot. So,
Sure. No, I'm just thinking, trying to future-proof it a little bit, and just thinking, you know, if Board of Aldermen's on break, then a meeting shall happen, you know, within a set amount of time of them coming back into session or something like that.
yeah, I would say.
So that it's not an emergency situation.
I'll say if it is an emergency where it's they need to get this technology right away for emergency, we do have that covered.
Well, I think that exigent circumstances covers that.
Yeah, that's covered in the bill. But if they were to go for a grant because now they want to, like New York City does have like robo-dogs, right? It's not probably an emergency that they would need to get that grant approved. That is not.
Sorry, I'm just laughing at a robot dog emergency, just like that idea.
But those type of technologies exist. Not saying that's an emergency. So that would be something where I see a lot of these technologies while the board is on break wouldn't be a extreme measure where we would have to be like, we need to act now. But I know that the president could always call a special session, and once the resolution go to the chair can always call for a meeting, even while we're on break. We're doing that with spring break, with the long-term health care, or members of the committee. We have a petition process where we could petition for a meeting to happen.
And I guess now that I'm just kind of thinking out loud on it, the ability to meet virtually also.
I'm happy you brought that up.
Makes things easier to get a quorum and get something done.
The way we've upgraded our technology, I think, well, actually, when we went on break, when we did the Right to Know and Alderwoman Spencer concealed carry bill, she was out of town, but she was able to log on Zoom. And thank you to the clerk and the president's office and Mr. Kennedy for actually upgrading kind of our technology. Now we do have Zoom capability. So if we needed to act, we could easily all hop on Zoom.
All right. Well, that's all I have. And so I think we're going to hold this for right now. That's your preference, right?
Yeah, just hold it for now. I want to say I want to thank my colleagues. I know I've been having a conversation prior to this meeting. I want to thank them for their willingness to continue to collaborate and us to cooperate together to figure out how do we get this across the finish line. A huge thank you to the community for continuing to try to meet somewhere to ensure this also gets across the finish line, with understanding that it's key to have an oversight component, because without the oversight coming through the board, it's really hard for the residents to be able to weigh in. And to Ms. Janika Hayden, and Cecilia Boyer from the office, who's been very helpful on this, and ultimately look forward to trying to figure out how we can get somewhere to get this done. So I want to thank everybody for the process.
All right. Oh, looks like Alderwoman Clark Hubbard has her hand up.
All Lord. Okay. I know he was just praising all of this, but can you hear me too?
We absolutely can, Alderwoman.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I did have one question that was elevated, and I wanted to have it for the public record, and it might not be able to be answered now, but I did wanted to ask. We all know about the looming state and local control fight that's going on as we speak, and I don't remember, I was asked if it was referenced in the legislation, what that would look like for this, if we can get it through the finish line, and what it would look like if that our state and local control changes. So if anybody can touch on that now, or if we can come back to that. I know that the question was posed from a couple of different people to me, and I wanted it to be publicly answered.
Yeah, I can. Oh, I could touch on
Proceed.
that. So, for at least for the section that is constantly stated from the mayor's office, I want to be clear that it's not the Police Bill of Rights section. The section that they are constantly bringing up was an ordinance that was passed back in 2012 under local control, and it's RSMO 84.341. It's a state statute that will derail from the ballot measure aimed at restoring local control. This statute prohibits individual elected or appointed officials from obstructing municipal law enforcement officers during their investigation. However, and I think sometimes when we read those statutes, we kind of stop at a certain sentence. However, it allows officials to act with their normal duties, the officials being the Board of Aldermen, duties, and implement regulations on policing and outlined in RSMO 84.343 to 84.346. So there is language in there that says that the Board of Aldermen has the ability to legislate when it comes to policing, because if that was the case, if we don't approve a grant, that grants have come through this board, that could be looked at as impeding. But the way that we read it, we as a Board of Aldermen have the right to do that. I would go back to even say civilian oversight, which has been a piece of legislation that had to do with policing and oversight, and this is just the same process. And as far as local control, what Jeff City will do, as a former state rep, I don't think they ever have the St. Louis on their mind when they're thinking about helping us or not. I know the local control bill has been filed in Jeff City for several years now. Even before this piece of legislation was filed, when they went back in session in January, they already filed that bill. So the argument that this would take away local control because they would try to take local control, I think that's out of the city hands, and we can't legislate for Jefferson City.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say, I think that was, maybe my question came off wrong. I have constituents that are asking if by chance the state does take local control, the state does take control, what does that mean for the ability to enact this legislation?
I would say if the state...
I'm not sure. I know the narrative that you're talking about, but that's not what I was speaking to. I'm sorry if it came off that way.
Yeah, I think if the state takes over local control, we as a board wouldn't even have much input. It would be an advisory committee between the mayor and I forget the layout that the governor picked, but the board wouldn't have much input on the board or on our St. Louis Police Department. So if we have local control, this piece of legislation would be for naught.
Thank you.
All right.
If local control is taken away, I should say, be for naught.
I knew what you
know
meant.
what I was getting. Okay.
I knew what you meant. Yeah, I knew what you meant. I just wanted to make sure people understood.
Okay, I think that concludes everything. Was that all you had, Alderwoman?
Thank you so much for letting me ask that additional question.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right. Does anyone have any announcements? All right. I'll just have one quick announcement. Sorry, STL TV. I was trying to get you out of here by 5, but didn't get that done. Everyone was here today, so at this point, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned.